In a strange land filled with trees shaped like a witch's fingers and thick black slime spread everywhere, the air already felt heavy with danger. Above it all, the sky stayed dark and foul, covered in a dirty and threatening haze. Trapped in the mouth of a horrifying monster full of sharp teeth, the young man felt pain rip through his body. With growing anger and despair, he reached the point where he could no longer endure it. Then the beast closed its jaws without mercy and swallowed him whole, while blood kept spilling without end. Dying in a place like that clearly meant total ruin. In the next instant, the boy opened his eyes in his own bed and understood that it had only been a dream. Desperately trying to breathe, he felt that the pain from that last moment had been far too real. What made it even worse was the cruel fact that this same nightmare had followed him for 12 years. Outside, morning rose over the large city as though nothing had happened. Without delay, the young man began writing every dark detail into his notebook. As he got up, he tried to convince himself that he could endure the pain of death itself. Even so, inside the middle of his messy room, the true suffering came from something much simpler: trying to sleep. Drained in both body and mind, he admitted to himself that he had no strength left for anything. The real problem was brutal. Falling asleep in the real world meant being dragged straight back into that horrible place where he would be hunted again. Whenever he suffered a deadly wound in the dream, the pain came back exactly the same in real life. Lying in bed with his hand pressed against his chest, proper rest had become impossible. Buried under extreme fatigue, the young man understood that something had to change. During those 12 years of endless suffering, he had learned battle tactics and martial arts just to stay alive. Moving through tall grass like someone trained to disappear, he had become a skilled fighter. Because of that, cutting down monsters in that living hell had turned normal, and dying had become less common. Still, as he walked between the shelves of a library, real life kept wearing him down. Even then, he knew the endless lack of sleep was ruining both his body and his mind. During a visit to the doctor, he was advised to find some quiet hobby that could calm him and help him sleep. With that suggestion in mind, the boy tried to think about what he truly wanted to do with his life. Yet deep inside, surrounded by books on every side, his only real wish was to collapse and rest at last. Broken to the core, the young man could only beg for one moment of peace. Then, without warning, blood poured from his mouth, and his body began to shine in a strange way. Unable to understand anything, his legs lost strength, and his vision faded into darkness. His body struck the floor hard, and he passed out in the middle of the library, surrounded by blood. When he woke again, the constant headache was gone, as if it had never existed, and his body felt incredibly light. For the first time in 12 years, he had truly slept, and fresh air filled his lungs. Facing a grim forest, the boy started to wonder if he had finally died in the real world. Resting himself against the trunk of a twisted tree, he carefully studied the scene around him. The truth struck with force, because this was the same nightmare world that had tormented his life all this time. From within the shadows, a giant lizard-like monster came forward, saliva dripping as it closed in on fresh prey. With his thoughts moving fast, the young man connected everything and recalled the blood he had coughed up before. There was no doubt left in his mind. This time, he had truly died for real. Faced with that harsh truth, everything had now changed completely. Standing upright and ready to move, he understood that if he died here, there would be no body waiting for him in the real world. From that point on, this cursed land had become his only reality. As he stared straight at the monster, the young warrior already understood every cruel rule needed to survive there. The first rule was simple: run toward a bright place, since those creatures hated the light. Even so, a sharp wave of adrenaline surged through his chest. Rather than flee, the boy pulled out his sword and rushed forward with firm resolve. Strength filled his body, and for the first time in a long while, he felt powerful inside a younger body that had finally been given proper rest. In a sudden rush of extreme speed, he closed the distance before the monster could even react. The scaly beast answered with an angry roar and opened its huge jaws, ready to swallow him whole. With his sword steady in hand, every part of his body burned for battle. At that moment, his mind held only one purpose: fight until the end, and destroy everything in front of him. With one fierce strike, the blade cut through the creature and split its body into 2 pieces. As the beast collapsed, the young man landed quietly on the ground, covered in blood. Without wasting time, he drove the sword into the corpse and searched through its insides. From deep inside the remains, he pulled out a glowing core filled with pure blue energy. Keeping his eyes on the strange object, he fully understood how valuable it was. Without hesitation, he bit into the stone and swallowed it raw. With blood spread across his face, his resolve to survive in that twisted hell became absolute. Then he returned to moving through the dead forest, and his journey truly began again. Ahead of him, sunlight reached the ground and revealed a bright area that offered safety. At the top of the valley, the warrior finally let out a brief breath of relief as he looked over the scene. After another full night of sleeping outside, he woke up feeling completely renewed. By then, he had spent an entire month cutting his way through the wild growth while heading toward civilization. Even though the desire to fight still stirred inside him, the boy knew that acting on impulse would only bring trouble. Picking a fight for no reason with giant demonic bats would be pure stupidity. Even while hidden in the shadows, the urge for blood still beat heavily inside his chest. The rule was clear. The hunt only started when hunger began to twist his stomach. With a powerful leap, his sword cut through a flying monster and solved the problem of food at once. Along with plenty of meat, another one of those blue energy cores appeared. He swallowed that raw source of power without pause. It was the main path to becoming stronger. He could feel the monster's strength flowing straight into his body. With his hunger gone, he rested in a tree, and eating those stones became the best habit for enduring that harsh routine. During a brief, careless moment, the young man noticed something important on the former owner of that corpse. From the words carved into the wooden tag, it became clear that the dead man had been a third-class mercenary. To his surprise, the boy's mind read those strange runes with unnatural ease. More than that, the simple tag hanging from the corpse's neck proved once and for all that other living people existed in that world. As he looked toward the bright light beyond the forest, the young man understood that he was not alone there. Then a strange metal trap drew his attention. From the first glance, it was obvious that the spiked device on the ground had been made to catch humans. Because of that detail, he realized civilization was much closer than he had first believed. With a quick leap, the warrior moved through the trees, hoping to find someone. Not far ahead, a wooden cabin appeared under the sunlight. His eyes widened at the sight of an actual shelter. Entering the strange place with caution, the boy called out to see if anyone was inside, but no reply came back. He began searching through the dusty furniture around the room. On an old table, a book with a strange cover and drawn runes caught his attention at once. The warrior quickly turned the pages and discovered that it was a record of the demonic realm. The shock on his face made it clear that what he had found was extremely valuable. Inside that book, the history and the laws of that dreadful world had been recorded in great detail. With such an important discovery before him, the young man became certain that he needed that encyclopedia to survive. Then the heavy sound of a boot striking the wooden floor cut through the silence. A gray-haired old man stood there with a giant crossbow aimed directly at his face, demanding to know who he was. Without any patience, the man made it clear that he would put a bolt through the boy's head if he did not get an answer. Even in that tense moment, the young warrior quickly understood that the owner had taken him for a thief. Trying to ease the situation, he explained that he had only entered out of curiosity. Still rough and cold, the old hunter told him to leave at once because he had no interest in talking. Not wanting to push the situation any further, the boy accepted the order and prepared to leave quietly. Even so, before stepping out, he pointed straight at the book covered in golden detail. In a restrained manner, he asked whether he could borrow it or even pay just to read it. The owner of the cabin answered with open challenge, making it clear that refusal was a real possibility. At once, the boy's expression darkened as he explained that the information in that book was necessary for his survival. Right after that, his hand moved straight to the hilt of his blood-stained sword. With a clear threat hanging in the air, he admitted that he would have to become a real thief if it came to that. Slowly, the blade began to leave the sheath, and the weight inside the room changed at once. Even without knowing how strong the old man was, the young warrior had complete faith in his own skill in battle. Unexpectedly, the old man lowered his weapon with a smile and introduced himself as Hector. Surprised by the sudden shift, the young man took the chance and revealed that his name was Kim Woo-jin. Since the older man had trouble saying that foreign name, the newcomer told him to call him Jin instead. Deep down, he knew that his true background was far too complicated for the people of that world to understand. Holding the book with care, Hector explained that the item was precious and could not leave the cabin under any condition. As a condition for allowing him to read the book, the hunter asked for help with the chores, and the boy accepted immediately. Outside, night slowly settled in and covered the small wooden cabin in thick darkness. Inside the iron pot over the fire, a hot stew boiled and released a rich and comforting smell. Seated at the table, the two of them ate dinner in peace, making it clear that the host had a kind side. With the first spoonful, the boy tasted the deep flavor of home-cooked food for the first time in 12 long years. With joy shining in his eyes, the young man devoured the soup and even began to see the old hunter as some kind of angel. The next morning, the sun had barely risen, and Hector was already preparing his equipment to leave for a long hunt. From what had been said the day before, the man's goal was revenge against the beast that had devoured his former companions. Just by watching the tension in the hunter's shoulders, the boy could tell that the creature had to be absurdly strong. With heavy steps, the seasoned hunter crossed the doorway and headed into the danger of the dark forest. Left alone in the quiet safety of the cabin, the young warrior finally opened the journal and began taking in the secrets of that land. Through those old pages, the story revealed that the entire disaster had started in a great empire to the north. Driven by greed alone, the former king had tried to open the gates to another dimension in order to steal absolute power. As a result of that ambition, a beam of red light tore through the sky and brought the beginning of the end. From that dreadful rift, a strange tower covered in eyes rose up and spread the nightmare across the land. Soon after, a horde of giant and twisted monsters invaded reality and destroyed everything in their path. The area quickly turned into demonic territory, forcing humanity to create a magical barrier. After closing the heavy cover of the book, the young man tried to process the huge amount of new information. According to what was written there, the demons became stranger and stronger the deeper someone moved into the darkness. On the other hand, the beasts weakened and grew smaller near places touched by natural sunlight. Far from the cabin, the situation turned desperate as Hector ran through the giant trees in panic. At that same moment, the boy connected the pieces and felt fear rise in his chest as he thought about how deep into that hell he had once been lost. Out of breath and soaked in cold sweat, the veteran hunter struggled to escape certain death in that deadly jungle. Right behind him, 3 massive werewolves with glowing red eyes chased their prey without mercy. With a fast shot from his crossbow, the old man tried to slow the beasts, but their defense was as solid as iron. With one casual swing of a claw, the bolt broke into pieces, showing that those creatures were a true nightmare made flesh. Faced with the absurd speed of the wolves, the old hunter cursed under his breath and realized that his end had come. Then, without warning, a dark shape cut across the forest at a speed even greater than that of the savage beasts. With a sharp blade in hand, the young man burst out from the brush and tore through the wind straight into the center of the chaos. In total desperation, the old hunter shouted with all his strength, ordering the boy to run from the danger. Ignoring that warning, the warrior simply jumped from a high branch and landed directly in front of the beasts. In a low descent, the force of the landing already set his body in place for an attack with crushing power. In less than an instant, a fierce slash tore through the air and split the leading werewolf from head to toe. The sight was so violent that the veteran stood frozen, unable to believe the strength of the newcomer. Shaking at the sight of the ruined corpse on the ground, the owner of the cabin struggled to understand how the beast had been killed in a single strike. Cold and steady, the young man turned his head and called the old hunter by name, cutting through the shock of that moment. With a confident smile, the boy asked whether such a weak creature was truly considered a high-level beast. Still stunned, the hunter could barely process the question and could only think of the danger a werewolf represented. After drawing in a deep breath, the man swallowed hard and confirmed with full certainty that those creatures were terrifyingly dangerous. That answer alone was enough for the young man to react with light amusement at how small the threat seemed. Holding his sword firmly, he declared that he would finish dealing with the remaining wolves before hearing the rest. Standing before the furious pack, the young warrior quickly judged the situation. With around 40 wolves ahead of him, even a small mistake would mean certain death. To avoid the drain of a long battle, the best choice was to crush the morale of the pack. Fixing his attention on the leader, the boy locked his eyes on a giant monster positioned at the front. As dark energy burst out, the sword was already raised and ready to kill. Before a blink could pass, the beast's eyes widened as it sensed the threat rushing toward it. The other werewolves turned in confusion, unable to understand what had just happened. Then the leader's body dropped to the ground and panic spread through the entire pack. Completely terrified, the monsters began barking in desperation. With fear taking over, the whole pack turned around and fled at full speed. Standing with quiet force, the young man wiped his sword against the ground as the dust slowly settled. Hidden among the brush, the veteran watched in disbelief as such fearless beasts ran away in terror. From the boy's sharp thinking, it was clear that he controlled the battlefield better than anyone else. Hours later, the two finally made it back safely to the small wooden cabin. Throwing the giant werewolf onto the table, the hunter explained that the bounty for that beast was 40 gold coins. Caught off guard by the amount, the young man asked if that kind of money was considered a lot in that place. With a broad grin, the old hunter made it clear that such a sum could support a comfortable life for around 7 years. After hearing that, the young man's mind immediately began to measure the profit from that hunt. If one weak wolf was worth that much, then hunting similar monsters would make it easy to fill his pockets. With that thought in mind, life in this new world suddenly seemed far better than the suffering he had left behind. Without delay, Hector prepared a backpack filled with the beast's hide, supplies, and a map. The next task was to head to the frontier village and find a merchant named Jacob. As a gesture of thanks, the old hunter offered the entire reward to the boy. Even though the young man refused at first, Hector insisted and treated it as payment for avenging his dead companions. With clear respect, the old hunter reached out his hand in farewell to the one who had saved him. That firm handshake sealed a bond of shared gratitude between the two. With the heavy pack over his shoulder, the young man gave thanks for everything and set off. Along the bright path, his solitary journey began again toward the so-called village. Between the thick trees, the young warrior disappeared into the distance in search of civilization. With steady steps, the long march through the forest finally came to an end. At the top of a hill, a strange monster fixed on a stake stood as a warning to any threat. Just below it, the frontier village rose into view behind massive wooden walls. Even from far away, the young man could tell that the place was heavily armed for such a small settlement. After passing through the gates, he immediately felt the tension hanging in the air. Along the dirt roads, every face turned toward the stranger with clear distrust. Sensing those heavy stares, the boy understood that outsiders were not welcome there. But in a place like that, one rule stood above the rest. Humans could be worse than demons. Ignoring the hostile mood, the young man pushed open the door of the local tavern. Inside, the noise of mercenaries and drunk men filled the main hall. Walking straight to the counter, the warrior paid no attention to the chaos around him. With a calm manner, he leaned against the bar and ordered a cold beer at once. During a break in the noise, he naturally asked where a man named Jacob could be found. At once, a bald man covered in scars turned his head toward him. Even while picking his teeth with a knife, the man's treacherous look remained obvious as he identified himself as Jacob. Without wasting words, the young man explained that old Hector had sent him to sell a pelt. The merchant's eyes widened in total shock when he heard that the hunter was still alive. With one quick signal of his hand, several large thugs began to close in around the newcomer. Staring at the thick hide, the bald man could hardly believe the perfect quality of the werewolf pelt. At that moment, greed completely took hold of the swindler's rotten mind. With a cruel smile, the criminal finally revealed his real nature without trying to hide it. In a mocking tone, the man praised the fact that the old hunter had managed to obtain such a rare trophy. As they joined the circle, the mercenaries inside the tavern pulled out their knives and prepared for dirty work. Without showing the slightest fear, the young man directly asked what exactly was happening. Already wrapped in the beast's hide, the bandit told him to leave if he wanted to walk out alive. Letting out a tired sigh, the young man concluded that the man truly had the face of a third-rate fraud. Using a weak excuse, Jacob claimed that he was only collecting old debts from the hunter. From the look of it, the bastard intended to use the goods to cover losses that did not even exist. Faced with such garbage, the young man's eyes turned red as he considered cutting the scoundrel down on the spot. Even so, staining his hands over a piece of leather felt too absurd a reason. Without warning, the merchant threw a mug of beer straight into the boy's face as if he were worthless. Laughing at the insult, the crook told the stranger to disappear before things became worse. Without giving any reaction, the warrior turned around and slowly walked toward the tavern's exit. Satisfied with the theft, the bald man mocked the boy for what he thought was cowardice. With a loud bang, the wooden door shut behind the young man and sealed the room. Then, standing in the middle of the hall, he broke the silence by calling the swindler by name. With a cold and twisted look, the boy made it clear that cheap betrayal was for fools, and that the proper way was to go straight for the throat. Paralyzed by fear, the bandit swallowed hard as he understood that he had provoked the wrong monster. Angry at such boldness, the thugs rushed forward with swords raised high. Shouting that the boy had no respect for his own life, the mercenaries launched a joint attack. Faced with that pile of trash, the young man decided that killing them would bring him no guilt at all. With a dodge far too fast to follow, the enemy blade cut through nothing but air. Shaken by the power and speed of that movement, the thug broke into a cold sweat. Like a red flash, the young man's sword moved at once and tore the first fool in half. As blood sprayed across the walls, the real slaughter inside the tavern began. Without losing momentum, the blade cut through a wooden shield and its owner in the same strike. The blow was so brutal that its sound echoed through the entire room. After seeing that damage, one mercenary cursed in panic, already aware that death was close. Without stopping, the boy kept cutting down anyone who stepped into his path inside the tavern. Shaking with fear, Jacob moved backward and tried to understand where such a human monster had come from. The merchant searched for some kind of reason, because someone that strong should already have been known everywhere. Realizing that staying there meant death, the swindler chose to move. Through the back door, he fled during the middle of the slaughter, cold sweat running down his body. Completely consumed by panic, the bald man shouted for his men to retreat. In that frantic escape, chaos spilled into the street as mercenaries crashed into one another. With a violent crash, the entire group was thrown out through the door and slammed onto the dirt outside. Dazed, one of the thugs tried to rise while groaning from the pain. Then, without warning, his face twisted into pure terror. A short distance ahead, a massive red wolf moved forward slowly, growling and letting saliva drip from its jaws. At once, complete chaos broke out, and more screams spread through the street because of the demonic beast's presence. Out on the road, the creature began barking like mad while staring directly at the boy who had just stepped out of the tavern. As he studied the animal, the young man realized that it was the scout wolf that had escaped back in the forest. With red eyes and a dark expression, he asked whether the beast had come there only to meet its own death as well. Faced with that insane stare, the giant wolf became frightened, and the fur on its neck rose at once. Without any hesitation, the huge beast dropped itself to the ground and began whining like a trained dog. In a pitiful sight, the monster rolled onto its back and even wagged its tail, begging for affection. The merchant's thugs stood frozen, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. Thrown off by the scene, the boy lifted an eyebrow at the creature's strange behavior. For a brief moment, he considered the absurd thought that this giant mutant might actually be. Before finishing that idea, the young man stepped forward with purpose toward the mercenaries. With chilling calm, he pointed a finger and ordered the wolf to attack the bandits. Like a faithful soldier, the monster straightened up at once and waited for the command to move. Then, in a savage leap, the beast hurled itself at the criminals and opened its jaws to tear them apart. Screams of agony filled the air as the red wolf devoured the thugs alive. Standing in the shadows of that bloody feast, the young man watched the slaughter with satisfied calm. Looking at that horrible sight, he concluded that this partnership had its uses. On the far side of the chaos, one thug cried out in terror while trying to crawl away. Caught in the middle of the confusion, Jacob searched desperately for some path of escape. Ignoring the panic around him, the young warrior judged the situation with complete calm. In a miserable act, the crooked merchant dropped to his knees and begged for mercy, promising anything if he were spared. Even so, the look in his eyes clearly showed that he was already thinking of revenge the moment he survived. Then, a deafening impact shook the ground, throwing dust into the air as the boy's blade struck the earth just inches from Jacob's face. With his sword buried in the ground, the young man stared down at the coward as he cried like a child. In a low voice, he cursed the fraud and made it clear that he had not believed that pathetic excuse for a second. That dark smile appeared again, and left no doubt that he would not pretend to be merciful this time. In a sudden flash, memories returned of all the times he had been treated like a fool in the real world. The excuse sounded just like those worthless bosses who asked for patience while his pay never reached his account. Back then, still naive, he had endured the humiliation in silence, believing that things would improve. In the end, those empty promises had only turned into endless delays in the salary he had earned through hard work. In his mind, the image came back clearly, his boss playing golf while putting off that month's payment yet again. Furious at the nerve of his former superior, the young man muttered about his own past and the shameless greed of useless men who demanded sacrifice from everyone else while filling their own pockets. Standing before Jacob, he drove his sword into the ground and remembered the misery of surviving while being used by others. At the very least, The pain of real life had taught him one thing: forgiving traitors only invited more trouble. Staring at the blade, the merchant understood that his pitiful crying had failed, and his face twisted into pure hatred. With a hidden knife in hand, he launched a sudden attack and rushed forward with a roar. The young warrior reacted at once and blocked the dagger with his own sword. In that instant, he understood once more that filthy exploiters never abandon their treacherous nature. With his teeth clenched in rage, the swindler shouted a curse with all his strength. Then, in one clean and immediate counterattack, a flawless strike sent blood spraying into the air. With red eyes fixed on the corpse, the young man silently set down his own rule for survival. In that merciless world, allowing himself to be made a fool of again was no longer possible. With the main task finished, he turned his attention to the remaining loose end. He looked toward the wolf, which now held the bag of spoils in its mouth. It was obvious that the beast had chosen to become the hunting partner of the one holding power. After a short moment of thought, the boy turned fully toward his strange new companion. In a casual manner, he asked whether the animal truly intended to follow him. In a submissive and almost affectionate gesture, the wolf lowered its forehead against his hand and accepted a scratch behind the ears. Seeing how clever the beast was, the young man smiled and understood that it knew very well which side was safer. From that point on, the unlikely pair would travel together, bound by a pact shaped through blood and survival. The next morning, a room filled with light showed that his rest had been complete, and the money was already proving useful. With a faint smirk, the young man enjoyed the fact that he had finally had a perfect night of sleep. Stretching his healthy body, he rose feeling refreshed, while his new furry companion let out a lazy yawn beside him. Out in the yard, while washing away dirt and sweat in a rough basin, he thought back over everything that had happened the day before. As he drew in a deep breath, the truth of his own actions finally struck him. After thinking it through, the warrior admitted to himself that he had taken human lives, many of them, during the slaughter in the tavern. Yet when he looked inward, a strange and troubling question began to rise. The thought remained in his mind that perhaps the complete lack of guilt came from the fact that those people had been cruel bandits. In truth, cutting those bastards down had felt no different from the addictive thrill of hunting powerful demons. Pressing a hand against his chest while his heart beat faster, the young man smiled in a dark way as he realized that killing had filled him with pure pleasure. Looking down at his own blood-stained hands, he felt that something inside him had changed forever. Cold and controlled, he even considered the possibility that he had become cursed, but soon dismissed it, because the only thing that mattered was staying alive. The bright side was clear. This new reality promised a life 1,000 times better than the slave-like routine of his old world. With the giant wolf at his side and a sword hanging at his waist, the journey began again without the injustice that had defined his past life. Set on making the most of the moment, the young man adjusted his hood and fixed his attention only on what waited ahead. His next destination was the great 5th Pioneer City, where he planned to sell the monster pelts. Before going in, he instructed the giant wolf to stay hidden in the bushes so the guards would not cause trouble. As he walked through the crowded streets, his goal was to find the headquarters of the Church Alliance and collect the bounty money. Looking around at the refined buildings, the boy noticed that the influence of the divine ran deep in that place. Soon after, a massive tower with its doors open stood out at the center of the square. After entering the wide hall, he asked one of the workers whether this was the correct place to exchange bounties. The attendant confirmed it, and the young warrior spread the giant werewolf pelt across the counter. Caught off guard and unable to believe it, the clerk first thought it was some kind of joke and said the hide looked like nothing more than ordinary dog fur, but after taking a closer look, the man's eyes widened in shock. Stumbling over his words, the employee shouted through the hall that the item was real werewolf hide. Still shaken, the clerk asked whether the boy himself had truly killed such a terrifying beast. Without reacting at all, the young man simply nodded and waited for his reward. A few minutes later, inside a luxurious waiting room, the silence ended with the arrival of a church superior. The priest apologized for the delay and explained that he had needed to verify the authenticity of such a rare item. Setting a heavy leather pouch on the table, he handed over the payment and asked the boy to inspect it. The moment the bag opened, the shine of 40 gold coins reflected in the young man's eyes and promised years of comfort. Holding real gold in his hands for the first time, he felt his heart beat in a different way. It was not fear that moved him, but greed. With a wide grin, he silently accepted that money in hand was always welcome. Then the priest cleared his throat, shifting the mood as he looked at the young hunter with serious eyes. Seeing the obvious talent of the stranger, the priest asked whether he would accept another task. The moment he heard the word request, the boy saw a perfect chance to earn even more. The clergyman explained that a new monster had recently appeared inside the local quarry and was causing severe trouble. Because of it, the miners had stopped working and the extraction of bloodstones had come to a halt, damaging the city's economy. The danger was serious enough that the creature there was considered far worse than a normal werewolf. For some reason, the priest believed that this quiet young man was the only person capable of handling the problem. Interested in the level of the threat, the boy asked what kind of creature it was. With a grim expression, the priest revealed the name of the monster, Mad Skull, with a bounty worth 70 gold coins. At the sound of that name, the boy's memory flared at once, linking it to the grim journal he had read before. The worst part was that the memory did not come only from those pages, but also from his own experience, because he had faced that monster before. The creature was known for a skull as hard as steel, and eyes burning with red hatred. Its savage aggression and brutal toughness made a werewolf seem harmless beside it. In the past, the young man had struggled for an entire month and died around 20 times before he finally managed to kill one. Troubled by the boy's silence, the priest asked whether the hunt would be too difficult. With a confident smile and a sharp look in his eyes, the hunter accepted the mission immediately. At the entrance of the massive circular quarry, the atmosphere alone already made it clear that this would not be simple. Looking at the machinery standing still and the dead silence hanging over the place, the young man understood why the city was so desperate. The dark energy rising from the pit felt so unnatural that just standing near it sent a chill through his body. Wanting to deal with the matter quickly, the young man started down the stairs, but a voice stopped him. A group of heavily armed mercenaries told the stranger to stop and respect the order of those waiting. Already losing patience, the boy questioned since when killing dangerous monsters had started requiring a line. Lifting his hands in a peaceful gesture, the leader of the mercenaries tried to ease the tension. The large man proposed that they work together and form a group to hunt the Mad Skull as a team. Thinking quickly, the young man understood that waiting his turn and dividing the reward offered no benefit at all. At the same time, joining them could save strength and prevent needless conflict. Still, the lesson he had learned in the tavern echoed in his mind and warned him not to trust anyone in that place. With a hard look, he rejected the offer and asked why they would want to recruit someone they did not even know. Letting out an awkward laugh, the leader admitted that he preferred to guarantee the group's survival no matter the cost. From his point of view, the boy's strength would be useful for keeping everyone alive. But the young man, suspicious of the sudden respectful tone, asked how they had decided that he was strong in the first place. At that exact moment, the answer appeared through his giant wolf companion, which stepped out and began sniffing behind a blonde woman in the group. The woman played with the beast, surprised to see such a large creature behave like a tame dog. Irritated by that disobedience, the boy muttered to himself, since he had clearly ordered the animal to stay hidden. Distracted, the giant wolf bit into a large chunk of meat that one of the mercenaries had offered it. The moment it saw the food, the beast completely ignored the angry look of its owner. Then, without warning, the juicy piece of meat slipped from its mouth and dropped onto the dusty ground. Filled with outrage, the young warrior shot a hard glare at the disloyal wolf, finding it ridiculous that it could be bought so easily with a piece of food. What made it even worse was the perfect shine of the meat, which still looked rich and tempting, even after falling onto the dirt. As he swallowed hard, his stomach let out a loud growl and exposed the extreme hunger of someone who had survived on nothing but plants and monsters. His whole body trembled with desire, craving the taste of real human food. Even with the meat lying on the ground, the urge to bite into it was nearly impossible to suppress. Trying to hold on to what little dignity he had left, the boy stretched out a shaking hand and fought against the urge to pick the food up from the dirt. Then, like an angel descending from above, the kind blonde woman noticed his hunger and offered him another clean piece with her own hand. With his eyes shining in pure delight, the young man accepted it as though it were some holy blessing. In his starving mind, that single snack was enough to make the woman seem like a glowing saint, worthy of complete trust. Soon after, the scene shifted to the entire group moving together down through the dark cave of the quarry. As he devoured the flavorful meat skewer, the young man nearly cried from the joy of tasting something so good. Using the walk as a chance to ease the mood, the kind girl finally spoke up and suggested proper introductions. The leader of the team introduced himself as Jonathan, commander of the Black Marlin mercenary group. Still happily chewing, the young man gave his name as Jin and accepted the alliance, already feeling as if he had joined the group. Once they reached the battle area, the mercenary leader immediately ordered the others to prepare the net traps. Turning around, he then told the blonde woman to begin her support work. In a sudden burst of magic, the healer summoned a strange power that caught the young warrior off guard. A mystical circle spread across the ground and revealed the true force of that ancient technique. Focused and steady, the woman blessed the entire area and gave the team a massive tactical advantage. The effect quickly wrapped around the lead fighter's body, making his movements light and swift. Feeling the energy run through him, the mercenary praised the flawless skill used by his partner. Then, with a quick burst of speed, he declared that he would lure the beast back within 5 minutes. Moving low and fast, his boots barely touched the rocky ground because of the power of the magic. From farther ahead, the leader waved and shouted for everyone to prepare for the attack. Watching the scene closely, the boy noticed the incredible speed that the buff had given his ally. Curious at once, he asked whether there was any chance of learning that useful technique himself. One of the mercenaries immediately cut off the conversation and shouted that this was no time for pointless talk. Completely tense, the man warned that even one stupid mistake there would lead to everyone's death. Thinking over the setup, the young man concluded that their strategy was to trap the beast in place and strike it with everything they had. Even so, deep inside, he strongly doubted that such a basic plan would work against a mad skull. Then, without warning, the leader appeared again, running at full speed and fleeing from something brutal behind him. Screaming with all his strength, the man gave the signal for the trap team to move. Right behind him, a massive boar-like abomination tore through the area, crushing everything in its path, foam spilling from its mouth in pure rage and making the mercenaries shake where they stood. The men froze in shock when they came face to face with that nightmare at such close range. Consumed by blind fury, the monster charged straight into the kill zone the group had prepared. In one coordinated motion, a huge net dropped from above and slammed onto the beast's heavy back. With all their strength, the mercenaries pulled on the steel ropes trying to force the creature down into the dirt. Using that brief chance, the spear team moved into position and readied their sharp throwing weapons. Cutting through the air, the spears flew directly toward the trapped target. But the twisted beast released a deafening roar and tore the iron net apart through raw strength alone. The mercenaries were thrown back violently and lost all control of the ropes, completely stunned by what had happened. With one terrifying burst of force, the monster freed itself and destroyed any hope of a simple victory. Without showing the slightest surprise, the young man only watched the disaster unfold, already knowing it would end like this. In total desperation, the leader shouted that the beast's power had broken through all of their defenses. Covered in cold sweat, the men tried to hold the ruined ropes, but the situation was already beyond saving. With a deadly spin, the monster used its giant tusks to rip apart what remained of the trap. Shaken by the disaster about to happen, the healer swallowed hard and saw the worst outcome coming. Faster than a flash, the boy caught the girl by the waist and pulled her out of danger. At the exact place where she had been standing, the massive creature smashed the stone floor apart in a furious charge. Sliding safely across the ground, the young warrior carried her far from the impact area as if it took no effort at all. Angry that its target had escaped, the beast fixed its red eyes directly on the pair. Still held in the young man's arms, the blonde girl cried out and warned him about the monster's absurd level of danger. With a cruel smirk, the boy told her to stay calm. He already knew every single cursed weakness that creature had. Roaring with rage, the mutant beast kicked up a cloud of dust and prepared to crush the arrogant young man. Drawing his sword, the warrior rushed forward and met it head-on with a fierce advance. When the two forces collided, the monster's crushing strength nearly shattered the young man's guarded defense. Claws and fangs pressed down with brutal force and shoved the hunter backward. Even while sliding across the ground, the boy let out a small laugh and admitted to himself that he had lowered his guard for a moment. At once, the healer cast her support magic directly onto his back. In less than an instant, the weight of his body seemed to disappear, and his agility rose sharply. Filled with the power of that blessing, the young man became certain that the hunt had now turned easy. From behind, the desperate leader shouted for the rookie to retreat and wait for a group assault. Ignoring the command, the boy burst through the dust cloud and changed the flow of the battle. In his mind, the young man admitted that he strongly preferred handling difficult battles alone. With flawless control, he dodged the attack and made the huge abomination crash into nothing but empty air. From the way he read the fight, the enemy was nothing more than an oversized beast that only knew how to charge in a straight line. To change direction, the stupid creature had to slam its hard back against the quarry walls. Using that weakness, the young man cut into the beast's leg and broke its running posture. Unable to keep its balance, the mountain of muscle crashed down and split the ground with a brutal fall. As he moved into the second step of his plan, the boy gave silent praise to the magic that had made everything far easier. Keeping his eyes on the monster's body, he knew those side tusks could cut worse than long swords. With exact timing, his blade met the attack head-on and stopped the beast's destructive ivory. Shifting the direction of the clash, he turned the strike toward the true target, the soft and exposed snout. A deep vertical wound tore through the beast's nose and sent blood spraying in every direction. Screaming in pain, the creature lost what little sanity it still had and began thrashing without control. Without giving it even a moment to recover, the young warrior rushed forward to deliver the final strike. With one perfect spin, his weapon sliced through the mad skull's neck and ended the monster at once. When the mercenary team ran over, they stopped cold after seeing the absurd result. Completely stunned, both the leader and the healer struggled to understand how the fight had ended so fast. Looking for the young warrior, the blonde woman stepped carefully toward the corpse. Then the giant red wolf jumped in front of her and let out a deep growl, guarding its master. Startled by the warning, the girl stopped at once and understood that the beast wanted no one getting closer. A moment later, the young man stepped back into the light, calmly wiping his stained mouth with the back of his hand. Relieved, the mercenary leader hurried to him and asked how he had managed to come out without a single wound. With complete coldness, the young warrior answered that the dangerous monster no longer existed. Behind him, the huge mass of limp flesh lay defeated across the mined stone. Amazed, the entire group celebrated the unbelievable sight of someone bringing down a beast of that level without help. Like a loyal companion of the hunt, the giant wolf showed its teeth, satisfied after feeding on the remains of the bloody scene. Just as the first battle ended, a second mad skull appeared without warning, snorting fiercely with burning eyes. Realizing the danger, the mercenary leader shouted in panic that the hunt was not over yet. But then the healer noticed something that changed the entire situation. Right behind the massive beast, several noisy piglets hurried along, trying to keep pace with their mother. With shrill grunts and curious faces, the little creatures made the scene far less threatening. Striking its hoof against the stone ground, the mother boar kept her eyes fixed only on the escape path. The leader finally relaxed, understanding that the beast did not want to fight and had only come to protect her young. Watching the family vanish into the shadows, the young man admitted that fighting a mother and her children would have gone too far. That night, back in the 5th Pioneer City, the mood was filled with celebration and complete relief. Stopping in front of the local guild, the group prepared to receive the reward from that brutal hunt. Inside, the leader lifted his glass and gave an emotional toast, celebrating the fact that no one had lost their life. Filled with pride, the large man declared that the best part of mercenary work was always the payment. Excited, the group raised their beer mugs, and the feast in the tavern began in full force. Confused by the pile of bags spread across the table, the young man asked whether all of that really came from the 70 gold coins together. Laughing loudly, the leader admitted that he had frightened the priest responsible for handling the payment. During the negotiation, the captain had insisted that the mission was far more dangerous than the official paper claimed. Beating his chest with pride, the big man revealed that he had managed to pull an impressive 110 gold coins out of the church's funds. The young man lifted an eyebrow as he remembered that they had not even fought the mother beast. With a sly smile and a wink, the captain admitted that he had stretched the story quite a bit to raise the payment. The mercenaries laughed hard and praised their captain's sharp tongue. Watching the scene with a faint smirk, the boy found the group's honesty and cunning strangely entertaining. Then, cutting through the celebration for a moment, the captain placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and drew his attention. With fairness in his voice, the man announced before the whole team that he would divide the reward and hand half of it directly to the young warrior. Taken off guard, the boy's eyes widened, thinking the share was far too generous. But the captain spoke plainly and made it clear that without the stranger's strength, everyone there would have ended up as food for monsters. On top of that, even after the increased reward, enough money still remained for the rest of the group to enjoy themselves. In a respectful way, the young warrior refused the large amount, remembering that the team's magic and support had also been important. Then, Slamming his mug onto the table, he decided to show that he could act like a friend as well. As a gesture of true camaraderie, he declared that the drinks for the entire night would be on him, and the celebration rose even higher. At that, the group lifted their glasses and swore to empty every barrel in the tavern. The next day, as he stepped out of the inn, the young man asked the blonde woman where she was rushing off to. With a gentle smile, the healer explained that she was heading into the forest to practice her support magic. Far from the city, in a field under the moonlight, the girl gave herself fully to meditation. Focused on controlling her mystical energy, her concentration became so deep that mana began to glow around her. Hidden behind the trees, the young warrior watched the scene and quietly respected the effort and discipline of his companion. With his eyes locked on the bluish glow, the thought of learning those techniques began to pound inside the young man's mind. As he imagined the advantage it could give him in battle, he started wondering whether he could truly master that strange power. Later, with a serious look, the young warrior asked the healer if she would be willing to teach him. Without any hesitation, the blonde woman broke into a bright smile and agreed at once to pass on everything she knew. As the reason for her kindness, she admitted that teaching him magic was the least she could do after he had saved her from certain death. Proud of her new companion, she made it clear that most mages would never accept such a request from a swordsman, but that he was an exception. Then the group's leader arrived and warned that learning magic usually took years, while the team planned to leave in only 2 days. With a quick motion of her hand, the girl suggested that the young warrior simply travel with them and learn during the journey. Careful not to disturb the balance of the group, the boy quickly made an excuse and said that he preferred traveling alone. Deep down, he hated lying, but he also knew that living as a lone wanderer had become his safest choice in that world. Changing the subject, he casually asked where the group was heading next. When he heard that their destination was the 4th pioneer city, he realized that their route matched his own exactly. Seeing the chance, the healer pressed the matter again, and the captain agreed with a smile, finding the coincidence too perfect to ignore. After all, traveling with someone that strong was the best protection the mercenaries could hope for. With a small and restrained smile, the young man gave in, and the group's new travel arrangement was settled. Days later, the team moved along the dirt road beside a massive beast of burden. Looking up at it, the young man recognized the creature as a Tarrasque, a giant monster that had been tamed to replace horses. Impressed by its size, he compared it to what he had read in the journal of the demonic realm. Walking at the front, the large man warned everyone that the trip would be long and told them to keep moving without slowing down. During the nights spent camping under the moonlight, the magic training finally began, and the young man quickly learned that it was far from simple. Disappointed by his own lack of talent, he came to see that the worst part of learning was the endless repetition that wore down the mind. Even with the healer teaching him patiently, controlling that invisible flow seemed impossible for him to grasp. Sweating through meditation, the frustration of making no progress struck hard at his pride. Even so, that kind of pain and failure was something the young man knew better than anyone. After enduring 12 years of dying inside his dreams, the young man's mind had turned into something like an unbreakable machine. Staying fully focused and direct, he decided that he would repeat the same attempt again and again until the magic finally worked. Then, in the middle of the darkness, a small blue spark suddenly crackled at the tip of his finger. Filled with joy, the healer jumped up and declared that he had finally managed to sense the flow of mana. Wiping sweat from his forehead, the young man admitted that he was disappointed it had taken 10 full days just to feel that first faint spark. With complete honesty, the girl agreed that he was terrible at it, but reminded him that many people spent their entire lives without producing even a single trace of magic. Excited by that small step forward, the teacher pulled several strange vials from her bag and announced that it was time for the second stage. Letting a glowing liquid fall onto a metal plate, she prepared a special ink for the next part. With a completely calm face, the blonde woman pointed at him and told him to remove his shirt right there. Without understanding what was happening, the young man obeyed while the cold night wind moved through the trees. Staying focused, the healer dipped her finger in the magic ink and drew a complex circle across the bare skin of his back. After finishing, she explained that the mark would act as a forced path for mana to enter his body. Keeping all his attention on the process, the young warrior closed his eyes and waited for the promised flow of energy. Without warning, the symbol began to shine and released sparks that burned against his skin like heated iron. In only a few seconds, his entire body lit up in a bright blue aura as raw power spread through him. His eyes widened as overwhelming strength rushed through his veins, and he realized that this form of magic stood on an entirely different level. With mana flowing through his body, the boy felt that force moving like thick blood. Watching him shine with intense light, the healer asked whether he could feel the perfect movement of magical energy. Pleased with the result, she announced that the first of the 3 vital stages had finally been completed successfully. According to the rules of magic, the first step was to sense it, the second was to store it, and only then could the real use of magic happen in the 3rd stage. Overjoyed, she suggested moving straight to the next challenge without losing any time. The method required forcing mana from the surroundings directly into the heart, while the learner held his breath. With complete concentration, the young warrior shut his eyes and tried to form that so-called invisible container inside his chest. The moment the healer placed her hands on him and started the transfer, pressure spread so heavily that the whole forest seemed to howl. Then, all at once, a cold shiver ran through the healer's spine and warned her that something was deeply wrong. In a violent burst of energy, the young man's mana overflowed like a dark tornado and hurled the girl to the ground. In panic, she realized that her own life force was being pulled into the chest of that human monster. Just before losing consciousness, a powerful impact threw her body far away and broke the deadly connection. Still dazed, the girl lifted her head and found herself staring at the red wolf, which was growling low. Shocked, she tried to understand whether the beast had sensed the danger and attacked on purpose to save her. The moment he saw the blonde woman on the ground, the young man snapped out of his trance and called her name, startled by the chaos around him. Rushing to her side, he dropped to his knees and anxiously asked whether she had been badly hurt. Still trapped in shock, the healer could barely answer, since her mind was still caught in the horror she had witnessed. During the transfer of magic, their connection had forced a dreadful vision of the young man's inner world into her mind. That spiritual space should have reflected peace within the soul, yet what she saw looked like a hell ruled by twisted beasts. Shaking, she could not understand how someone so calm could carry such darkness inside. Grabbing his shoulders, the blonde woman demanded a direct and honest answer. With a trembling voice, she asked whether he had ever done something mad enough to eat the core of a demonic monster. Confused by the unfamiliar term, the young man raised an eyebrow and made it clear that he had no idea what she meant. When she described a blue stone filled with energy, he merely shrugged and admitted that he ate those things all the time. Completely stunned, the girl's eyes widened, and she demanded to know how many of those stones he had swallowed. After doing the numbers in his head, the young man replied with total calm that he had been eating them like snacks for around 12 years. That meant the total had to be in the tens of thousands. Hearing such an insane number, the healer stood frozen with disbelief, convinced that it had to be some kind of sick joke. According to the rules of magic, the answer was simple. If a human swallowed a core, survival was impossible. Any fool who tried it was supposed to die on the spot from poison. Even worse, the body could twist and change, turning that person into a corrupted demonic monster forever. Jin tilts his head up under the moonlight, one eye glowing red. A deer stands over a blood-soaked carcass in a dark forest, as karma is described. A deer with glowing eyes and blood around its mouth remains in the forest, showing that karma is the corrupted energy from the demonic realm, and those who absorb it gain unnatural abilities. A monstrous deer lets out a roar, while a monster core is described as a nucleus, formed from built-up karma inside the body. Claire stands beside the Teresk while Jin and Jonathan walk near it along the forest path. Claire narrows her eyes, uneasy, noting that the dark priest appears when the otherworldly gate opens and karma consumes the world. A robed figure raises an arm as a mass of eyes spreads behind him, and some humans begin to follow monsters that absorb karma, calling them angels. A monstrous deer stands over a human body on a stone altar as those people consume monster. Cores are consumed, and some offer humans to monsters as sacrifices, earning the name of madmen. Jin looks ahead, recalling how he began consuming them while hunting monsters and continued for around 10 years, possibly reaching thousands or even tens of thousands. A mass of glowing red eyes spreads through the darkness as Claire realizes he has consumed monster cores and considers the possibility that he could be a dark priest. Claire lowers her head in thought while Jin stands behind her, confused, as she decides he cannot be a dark priest since he openly admitted it and revealed his mental world. Jin swings his sword, cutting through a purple creature, while Claire walks behind him, thinking it might be even stranger that he kept consuming monster cores without knowing the danger. Jin holds the severed body in one hand as blood drips from the cut. Claire shuts her eyes while Jin stands behind her chewing, questioning why he would pick up and eat something so foul. Claire crosses her arms and stares ahead while Jin continues chewing beside her, seeing him as a strange man and wondering what he eats now, knowing he copied monsters by consuming cores. She leans toward him with a serious look, making it clear he must stop consuming monster cores from now on, as luck is the only reason he is still alive. Jin rests his hand on his chin, thinking about how she claims consuming cores kills a person or turns them into a monster, yet he remains alive, making him question if that belief is wrong. Jin looks forward calmly, wondering if his lack of feeling after killing and his constant urge to fight are caused by the cores. His eye glows red as he stares ahead, suspecting the cores are the reason. Jin walks away with a sack over his shoulder, saying he will try, while Claire calls after him, insisting he must stop completely. Claire stands behind him with arms crossed, warning that continuing will put his life at risk and prevent him from using magic, causing Jin to react in surprise. Jin turns back, questioning if it is true that he will lose the ability to use magic, while Claire shows that this matter is even more serious than his life. Claire lets out a breath, explaining that in his current state using mana manifestation will be difficult, though it is not completely hopeless. She raises one finger, pointing out that he should still be able to use mana arts at least. Jin turns his head, unsure of what mana arts are. Fourth Pioneer City rises with a tall tower standing above the surrounding buildings. People gather in a plaza beneath a high column topped with a winged statue, water flowing around it from a fountain. Jin scans the crowded plaza as Claire and Jonathan stand behind him, noting the large number of mercenaries gathered and that it is too early to be shocked given the size of the request. A silver-haired knight in armor walks before the crowd as the mission is overseen by a holy knight. Holy Knight Raymond moves forward in full armor with a long sword resting at his side. Jin glances back while Claire shows a faint smile beside him as the Holy Knight observes them from behind. The Holy Knight shifts his gaze toward Jin, sensing a heavy presence far beyond that of ordinary mercenaries, recognizing he is not a normal human. Jin looks toward Claire, wondering if large crowds always gather when a Holy Knight leads the task. Claire explains it happens because the request comes from the Golden Bug Wolf. Jin turns to her, questioning if the Golden Bug is some kind of insect-type monster, while she reacts as if it is strange he does not know. Jin keeps a confused look as she realizes he knows almost nothing beyond hunting. He walks beside Jonathan and Claire, placing his arms behind his head, as the Golden Bug is described as a powerful businessman with vast wealth, one of the richest figures around. Jonathan lowers his gaze, mentioning the Golden Bug died suddenly not long ago. Jin walks beside him, wondering if the death was caused by someone. Jonathan continues walking with his arms behind his head, noting that there are rumors but nothing confirmed. Jin looks toward the crowd gathered near the request board, questioning why so many people are present if the Golden Bug is already dead. Jonathan explains while walking beside him that the Golden Bug left behind 2 sons. The 2 sons stand back to back, surrounded by piles of gold and valuables, as the task involves moving their fortune into the barrier. Jin looks ahead in silence, thinking about transporting such massive wealth, while noticing the large crowd. He stiffens slightly while standing with Claire and Jonathan, as a voice calls for the Black Marlin mercenary group to step forward. Jonathan pushes Jin through the crowd, forcing him ahead as their turn arrives. He stands beside Jin, gesturing toward him while presenting him as the group's strongest fighter, known for defeating a mad skull and taming a werewolf. Jin turns his head slightly, sweat running down his face, as people in the crowd stare and question his strength, calling him the rumored head crusher. Jonathan keeps a grin while Jin shows discomfort, as the situation is brushed off and endured. The silver-haired Holy Knight Raymond looks forward calmly. Jin and Jonathan stand before the request board as Raymond announces the reward of 100 gold coins and orders departure at sunrise the next day. Jonathan clenches his fist and shouts in excitement, urging movement, while Jin raises his fist beside him, noting the high payment just for transporting goods. He shows confidence with a raised thumb, explaining that half the reward is for the work, and the other half comes from reputation, which determines the hiring fee. Jin looks ahead with a calm face as sweat runs down, while Jonathan points out they received a high reward thanks to Jin's reputation as the head crusher. Jonathan stands beside him, explaining that the name Head Crusher has become his nickname, as an image forms of Jin smashing a monster's head. Jin lets out a breath with a tired look, thinking the person who created that name has poor judgment. Jonathan walks beside him with a sack over his shoulder, treating the 100 gold coins as a huge win, while Jin moves in silence. Jin keeps a serious look ahead, seeing this level of fame as a way to learn mana arts. A large building stands under the moonlight, lamps glowing from its windows, known as the mercenary group quarters. Inside a packed arena, one fighter clashes with another while the crowd shouts for blood and urges them not to back down. A punch crashes into a fighter's face, snapping his head back from the force. Claire stands near the railing, uneasy about Jin stepping into the arena, while a victor raises his arms and Jin wraps bandages around his hands. Jin tightens the cloth around his fists, focused on drawing attention to learn mana arts, as Claire watches with concern. Jin stands in the wooden arena, adjusting the bandages on his arm, as it is known that holy knights take interest in strong individuals. Raymond looks forward calmly, as those acknowledged for their strength can receive better treatment. Jin faces an opponent in the arena, fists wrapped, viewing the fight as manageable. He looks toward the stands, seeing the arena as a place where fighters risk their names, aiming to attract the holy knight's attention. Jin lands a fast punch to his opponent's face, marking the first strike. An arm swings in response, striking Jin across the side of his face. Jin drives his fist into the opponent again, blood spraying as the man's head snaps back. He grabs the opponent's head with both hands as the body recoils. Jin slams his own head forward into the opponent's face. The opponent is thrown backward through the air while Jin stands with one leg raised, and the crowd shouts that the head crusher lives up to his name. Raymond lifts a mug and drinks while watching the arena, as Jin notices he has gained attention. Jin throws another punch into a new opponent's face, realizing that attention alone is not enough, and that this is only the beginning. He spins and kicks another opponent across the head, knowing he needs to defeat more fighters to be taken seriously. Jin drives his knee down into another opponent's head, thinking that taking down a few more should be enough. Jin stands at the balcony railing, watching the arena, as his thoughts remain fixed on the holy knight. The knight begins to question where someone like Jin came from. Jin stands in the arena with defeated fighters scattered around him, thinking about taking down many opponents. He looks toward the balcony where Raymond and the red-haired knight stand, believing that a true knight would think this way. Raymond turns toward the red-haired knight and gives an order for Rex to fight Jin. Rex looks ahead with a tight expression, shocked at being told to face a mere mercenary. Jin stands below as Raymond and Rex look down at him, and it becomes clear that this moment marks the real beginning. Jin keeps a calm expression and refuses, showing that this is how he starts negotiations to learn mana arts. Rex stares ahead with wide eyes, caught off guard. The mercenary dormitory stands under the night sky, the full moon casting light over it. Claire looks ahead with worry, staying silent. Jonathan also faces forward, tense and quiet. People in the arena crowd stare toward the ring, confused, unsure of what is happening. Rex grips the railing and shouts down, demanding a reason for the refusal. His fist tightens, teeth clenched in anger, while Raymond remains calm beside him. Raymond stands at the railing, looking down and checking if Jin has been injured. Jin raises a bandaged hand with ease, showing no signs of harm. Raymond narrows his eyes, questioning the reason for the refusal. Jin stands in the arena with a hand on his chest, presenting himself as a mercenary driven by money and strength, unwilling to fight a holy knight apprentice without gain. He looks up with confidence, proposing a wager. Raymond looks down, thinking it over, noting that both sides must want something for a bet to work, questioning what Jin could offer. Jin crouches beside a fallen fighter, looking up, pointing out that even without status, he holds a massive amount of wealth. He lifts a heavy pouch filled with gold coins, letting it swing in his hand. Jin stands in the arena holding the pouch as the crowd reacts in shock, some realizing he is proposing a gamble with a holy knight. Rex glares forward, jaw tight, filled with anger. Raymond reaches out and grips Rex's shoulder, making it clear they do not need Jin's money. He looks ahead calmly and shifts the terms. Jin looks up at two robed figures standing behind the railing as Raymond states they will remove all responsibility for any damage during the fight. Raymond looks down from above, making it clear that this is their condition. Jin smiles, tapping his chest, deciding he will reveal what he wants after the duel ends, already thinking that without any cost for damages, he can defeat Rex. Jin accepts, showing he plans to take the fight as far as he wants. Rex tightens the bandages around his hand while standing across from Jin in the arena. Rex stares forward with a strained glare, sweat and shadow covering his face. Jin looks straight ahead with narrowed eyes, calm and steady. Spectators lean over the railing, shouting and pointing toward the arena, pushing him to fight and placing their bets on Jin. Jin shifts his stance slightly, while Claire stands behind him with clenched hands, and Jonathan folds his arms, telling him to signal if things turn dangerous, while Jin shows no concern. Jin tilts his head with quiet confidence, certain of victory. Rex stands in the arena, looking ahead, questioning how far he should go, and Raymond answers from above, telling him to use full strength. Raymond looks down with focused eyes, knowing Jin will not be easy to handle. Rex stands with his back turned, as golden energy begins to swirl around his body, both fists tightening as he prepares. Spectators lean forward, shouting with excitement as they notice the use of mana arts, cheering for the holy night. Rex plants his foot firmly, golden energy spiraling around his leg. He bursts forward, golden energy trailing behind as he closes in on Jin. Jin turns his head with widened eyes, realizing the speed is far beyond normal. Rex's fist slams into Jin's body with a surge of golden force. Jin's face tightens, blood forming at the edge of his mouth, understanding that a direct hit like this could be fatal. Rex drives his arm forward again, golden energy streaming along it, while Jin watches closely, noting the strange nature of mana arts. Jin raises his bandaged hand in front of his face, blocking the incoming strike. Rex brings his glowing fist down hard, golden energy bursting at the point of impact. The strike explodes against Jin, throwing him backward across the arena floor. Jin wipes blood from his mouth with the back of his bandaged hand as Rex focuses on him. Rex stares ahead, golden energy flickering around his fist, seeing Jin as nothing more than a wild beast despite his reputation, intent on crushing him. Spectators lean over the railing in shock, realizing the head crusher is being forced back, and that even a trainee holy knight stands on a different level, while one voice fears losing everything. Claire watches with a tight expression, focused entirely on Jin. Raymond stands with arms crossed, silently observing the fight. Rex charges again, surrounded by swirling golden energy, while Jin raises his arms and braces as he is pushed back. Jin covers his face with his bandaged hand as the golden force crashes toward him. The force sends Jin sliding backward across the arena floor. Raymond rests a hand on his chin, sensing something unusual. Jin crosses his arms in front of his body, blocking as golden blows crash into him, while it is noted that he had taken down the other mercenaries with single strikes. Raymond narrows his gaze, noticing how passive Jin's movements have become, suspecting he is holding something back. Rex shows anger, teeth clenched tight. Rex leaps high, golden energy spiraling around his arm, then drives a glowing fist downward. The attack rushes toward Jin, who redirects it across the arena. Jin shifts aside, extending a hand as Rex's glowing strike slams into the balcony behind him, breaking part of the floor. Jonathan tightens his fist, shocked, realizing Jin deflected mana arts with his bare hand, questioning if that should even be possible. He stares forward with wide eyes, tension clear on his face. Jin turns slightly away, blood dripping from his mouth. He wipes the blood with a faint smile, deciding he has finished measuring Rex's strength. Jin lowers his bandaged fist, considering testing Rex's endurance next. His punch crashes into Rex's body with a heavy burst of force. Rex's eyes widen, sweat forming as shock sets in. Jin frowns, confused, realizing the hit was just a normal strike, yet Rex reacted strongly, questioning if Rex had been waiting for an opening the entire time. Rex bends forward, coughing hard, while Jin stands beside him calmly, making it clear he had been holding back and taking his time. Jin looks down with a faint smile, blood still at the edge of his mouth. He bends slightly, noting that even after a strong hit, Rex is still standing, wondering if that is due to mana arts. Rex struggles, sweating and breathing heavily, still trying to endure. Jin cracks his fingers, showing interest in how many hits Rex can take. Rex's face tightens in confusion as he senses movement. Raymond raises his hand toward Rex, stopping him, making it clear the fight is over and that Rex has lost. He faces forward with a firm expression, deciding to honor what was promised and end the match. Jin stands relaxed, his bandaged hand hanging loosely, showing slight annoyance as he had only just begun. A faint smile forms on his face, blood smeared across his lips as he stays still. He realizes his plan worked. The crowd leans forward around the arena, fists raised, shouting with excitement. Jin stands facing the two knights on the platform. A large mansion stands under the night sky, with a fountain set before it. This is the Golden Bug Wolf's mansion. A man bites into a large piece of meat, grease running down his mouth. Two shirtless men sit at a table full of food, tearing into meat with their hands. They are known as the Golden Bug's first son, Derek, and second son, Cedric. Both men tear into large chunks of meat, chewing heavily as sweat runs down their faces. One of them complains that it will take 10 days to reach the wall, blaming the Order Alliance for it. He keeps chewing with clenched teeth, sweat dripping, seeing them as empty talkers with no real action. A hand grips a bundle of noodles tightly, crushing it as sauce splashes outward. He questions whether they can last until then, realizing there are no other options. One man leans over the table, food held near his mouth, his back covered in glowing blue growths. He believes the only choice is to endure and hope their bodies hold together until that time. The blue growths swell and throb across his skin. Raymond stood before a tree and pressed his hand against the trunk, while the idea of mana arts was revealed in its raw form, not as some flashy move, but as the very base of combat itself. Mana took shape like an extra limb, strengthening both body and blade. The idea sounded simple, but its highest form was terrifying. Then he drew his sword and moved in one clean strike. A burst of yellow energy exploded outward in the form of a sacred flame slash. The nearby trees were cut apart at once, crashing to the ground as the sound spread through the forest. Raymond calmly sheathed his blade, as if the act meant nothing. Rex instantly broke into applause, fully stunned, pouring out praise toward Raymond as though he were standing before a living legend. The admiration nearly crossed into worship. Raymond ended it at once. He called for Rex to switch in. Rex immediately straightened up, responded without delay, and quickly stepped away. At the same time, Jen watched in silence, bothered by something in that technique. The feeling stayed in the back of his mind, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Instead of being swept up in awe, he studied the broken trees and examined the result. It was powerful. It was polished. But even so, that level of destruction felt like something that should be reached without leaning on a special technique. Before he could stay on that thought any longer, Raymond turned to him and brought his attention back. He explained it in a simple way. Mana had to move like muscle. Just as veins rose and muscles tightened, mana had to be grasped and held within the body in the same way. Jen let out a breath and steadied himself. That part, at least, was already familiar to him. Then he suddenly stopped in the middle of focusing. Something felt wrong. A huge wave of mana rushed through his body, far greater than anything he had ever felt before. But it was not violent or unstable. It moved in a calm, smooth, nearly weightless way. Then the answer struck him. It was Claire's mana. The energy around him began to change. Blue shifted into a deep and unsettling purple. Behind him, Raymond kept explaining, unaware at first, guiding him to release the mana slowly, little by little. Then Raymond felt it and turned. The air itself grew tense. Purple mana wrapped around Jen's sword like a living whirlpool, dense and suffocating. Raymond's eyes widened. Jen was already bringing out mana arts just by hearing the theory alone. But that was not even the true issue. Mana arts reflected the user's inner world, the shape of their mind, the core of their nature. So what kind of mind could create something like this? That aura was not only strong, it was twisted, dark, wrong. Raymond kept staring at Jen as a sense of unease slowly rose inside him. He could not help but wonder what kind of monster was being hidden beneath that calm exterior. Jen, on the other hand, only smiled, completely untouched by the tension. He held his sword in one hand and began to move. He swung to the left, then to the right, and followed with a clean thrust forward, testing the feel of it and trying to understand the flow. But something did not sit right with him. His control felt rough. The energy burned away too quickly, and the result felt wasteful. It consumed too much and gave back too little. The cost was high, but the force was lacking. Even so, his grin only grew wider. It looked ridiculously cool. And in that instant, one clear thought hit him. He needed to test it in a real fight. The scene then shifted to Claire, who was clearly impressed. Jen had not simply learned mana arts. He had practically taken hold of it the moment he was taught. Even she failed to fully hide her surprise. Jen, however, stayed grounded and gave all the credit to her. Still, one thing had been bothering him. When she strengthened him earlier, it had not felt temporary. It felt as if a part of her mana had remained inside his body. Claire paused for the briefest moment, then brushed it aside and treated it lightly. She made it sound like nothing more than a small gift for saving her life. Jen did not truly buy that explanation. A small gift did not feel like this. Still, Because of that gift, he was learning far faster than he ever should have. As Jen kept riding forward, Rex passed by and immediately started talking. He belittled Jen's progress, treated mana arts like a basic skill, and added a sharp remark about Jen wasting Sir Raymond's time. Someone was clearly still holding on to yesterday's anger. Jen let out a quiet sigh in his thoughts, already tired of it. So Rex was still upset. Then a smirk slowly formed. That worked just fine for him. Things had been dull anyway. If Rex wanted tension, Jen had no problem pushing it further. He even started wondering if he could provoke him into asking for another rematch. Jen did not waste time. He casually tapped the back of Rex's horse, and the animal shot forward like a rocket. Chaos followed at once. Raymond rode past Jen and immediately moved to handle the problem, stepping in to calm things down, apologizing, and assuring everyone that Rex would be controlled. But before the situation could settle, an angry scream burst out from the lavish tent on top of the terrask. The voice cursed the servants as useless fools, complained about hunger, and demanded that the food be brought out immediately. Raymond brushed it aside and explained it away. It was only the clients, the sons of the so-called Golden Bug. Since their father had died, all they had done was eat without stopping, and whenever the food stopped coming, they lost control. According to him, the best choice was to ignore them. Jen did not ignore it. Something about it felt wrong. Calling it stress eating felt far too simple. As more and more food vanished into that tent, the atmosphere itself seemed to grow heavier. It felt oppressive, unnatural. Jen's eyes narrowed as his suspicion deepened. This was not normal. It felt like something was gathering behind it all. Beneath that endless hunger, it felt as though a monster was preparing to break free. Then Jen's eyes widened sharply. A thunderous roar ripped through the forest. The terrask. The ground shook hard, and then it collapsed. Panic exploded across the area immediately. Still on horseback, Raymond demanded a report, his voice cutting through the disorder. His men answered at once. The terrask carrying the clients had gone completely mad. For the briefest moment, Raymond went still. The Golden Bug's sons were on it, but there was no room to think. He called for Rex and pulled out his sword, golden energy flaring around him as he prepared to move. Raymond rushed forward without the slightest hesitation and took command of the crisis. His orders came out fast and absolute. The clients had to be protected no matter what. The terrask had to be subdued, and if there was no other choice, it had to be killed. Rex responded immediately and moved to carry out the order, but the true horror showed itself in the next instant. The luxurious tent was ripped open from the inside. Grotesque spikes tore through it, shredding the fabric apart, and from the ruined shelter, a giant worm-like creature came crashing down. So this had never been a simple outburst. Claire's voice cut through the shock as she identified it as an abomination. Jen immediately questioned it, trying to understand what he was seeing. Claire gave the answer without delay. An abomination was what happened when a human was twisted into a beast by Mag Young's karma. It was not something born that way. It was made. Jen's mind jolted at the meaning of it. A human had become that thing. Raymond drew a breath and launched himself forward as mana surged through him. In one decisive attack, using Divine Flame Cleave, he split the monster into 4 clean pieces. There was no pause, no pity. He then called for Rex, who leaped in and cut through the remains, scattering chunks of flesh across the ground. For a brief moment, it seemed finished. Then the body moved. The severed pieces twitched, then began dragging themselves back together. The creature was regenerating. Raymond's eyes widened as he warned Rex to be careful, but he was already too late. Rex stood there, only just realizing that something had gone terribly wrong. Then, behind him, the monster rose again. In one horrifying instant, it lunged and swallowed him whole. Everything fell silent. Only his arm remained behind, still clutching the sword. Rex had been devoured alive right in front of them. Raymond's expression darkened at once. The calm and steady presence around him shattered, replaced by something far sharper, far colder, and deadly. There was no pause, no order, only fury. He burst forward and unleashed a sacred fire slash in a brutal arc that tore through the monster's body. The creature let out a scream of pain as the strike split its form apart, but Raymond did not stop. He rushed straight into the chaos and headed for the monster's mouth. The only thing driving him now was desperation. He pushed forward with the single goal of pulling Rex back out, refusing to accept that he was already lost. Inside the collapsing mass of flesh, Raymond kept searching. and would not abandon Rex. The monster, however, was not finished. The severed tentacles began to rise again, regenerating as they twisted back toward him like living blades. From a short distance away, Jen watched with his lip caught between his teeth. Then something clicked. At the exact moment those tentacles were about to strike, Jen moved. He flashed into their path and cut them down in mid-lunge. Steel clashed against corruption. In a single instant, he intercepted the attack and shielded Raymond in the middle of the chaos. Jen quickly pulled him back to a safer spot and carefully lowered him to the ground. The Holy Knight looked wrecked. His body was badly damaged, his breathing was rough, and he had clearly pushed himself far beyond his limit. Around them, the hunters began to panic as they saw what had happened. The Holy Knight had fallen. Fear spread through the group almost at once, and control started slipping away. Behind them, the monster roared again. It was still alive, still regenerating, still growing worse. Jen, however, was not focused on the panic around him. As he stared at the abomination, his thoughts drifted for a brief moment. A human had been turned into a monster. Then a quiet and unsettling thought reached him, one he could not avoid. If he kept consuming internal cores, would he one day end up like that too? He did not stay on it. Not there. Not then. His eyes sharpened, cutting through the doubt. Thinking about it would solve nothing. His decision settled instantly. The first thing that mattered was killing the abomination. The monster attacked at once, sending a flood of tentacles straight toward Jen. He slipped through them smoothly, reading each movement with sharp precision. Its digestion was incredible. In one motion, he cut down several tentacles, but the real problem showed itself immediately. They regenerated. The endless recovery made him click his tongue inwardly. At that pace, the battle would turn into a long war of endurance. This time he chose to take the hit directly and block it, but the force still drove him backward. He slid across the ground before steadying himself, his eyes narrowing as he examined the point of damage. He needed to find its weakness while saving as much stamina as possible. Before he could move again, something burst from the side of the monster's body. A spear of energy tore through it. Jonathan had decided to step in and help Jen as well. Across the battlefield, Claire moved forward with calm focus and began chanting. The air around them shifted. One after another, the hunter's weapons answered her spell, and the spears began to glow with a bright blue light in perfect sync with her magic. Then they struck. Dozens of empowered spears pierced into the monster's regenerating flesh, pinning it down and disrupting its recovery all at once. For the first time, its regeneration stumbled. The hunters began to rally as the battle slowly started to turn. It was working. Thanks to the magic, the regeneration was slowing down. The hunters shouted for one another not to let the severed pieces reconnect. They pushed themselves to do their part. The fear had not vanished, but it no longer froze them in place. They were fighting through it now. Jen heard everything and let a faint, pleased smile appear. They were doing better than he expected. He had thought they would be completely overwhelmed by fear. For a brief moment, hope appeared. Then Jen felt it. The monster's energy shifted, and Jen noticed it at once. His eyes narrowed sharply. Its presence had changed. A sudden wave burst from the abomination as violet-red mana exploded outward from its body. Then it appeared. Faces. Human faces were embedded in the creature's shoulders. The battlefield froze. The hunters pulled back in shock. Their eyes locked onto the twisted sight in disbelief. Faces were growing from its shoulders. They belonged to the golden bug's sons. The truth struck hard. This was not just a monster. This was what remained of them. The abomination surged once more. Tentacles whipped out with violent force, dragging the scattered chunks of flesh back toward itself, as if the battlefield were being undone. The hunters panicked immediately. The creature was pulling its own flesh back. Piece by piece, it rebuilt its body and grew stronger as it reclaimed everything that had been cut away. Jen moved at once and tried to attack the opening, but his strike was stopped in midair. One of the faces on the monster's shoulder let out a scream, and a tendril like a twisted tongue shot straight at him. Jen reacted just in time, knocking it aside with his sword before landing back on the ground. Jonathan's voice broke through the chaos as he checked on Jen. Jen was unharmed, but he warned everyone to stay alert. That thing had become stronger. Jonathan quickly caught onto the pattern. The shift had happened when the golden bug's faces appeared. That led to the next problem. What were they supposed to do now? Jen did not waste a second. They had to keep cutting it apart. If they kept carving through it, then eventually only the internal core would remain. Even he understood the real problem, though. Its regeneration speed was still insane. Jonathan tightened his hold on his weapon and steadied himself. If that was the issue, then there was no reason to lose heart. They had already learned the creature's attack patterns. His eyes hardened with resolve. Just as the monster had become stronger, so had they. Jen let out a slow breath as the battlefield settled for one brief moment. If that was how it was going to be, then he would answer in kind. He brought his sword forward as purple mana flared along the blade like a living fire. Then he decided he would cut it apart as much as he pleased with those mana arts. He launched forward without hesitation and without wasting a single movement. Jen tore across the battlefield, cutting down the incoming tentacles one after another and forcing his way through the monster's defenses. A wide slash tore through its body. The abomination screamed in pain, but Jen did not slow down. He kept pressing forward, attacking again and again until nothing remained except the exposed inner core. Then he stood in front of it, both hands wrapped tightly around his sword. The core pulsed before him, glowing with a deep and unstable light. His focus sharpened completely. It was over. He delivered one final swing. The blade came down, and the core split in two. For a brief moment, everything became still. Time itself seemed to pause. Jonathan let out a breath of relief. The hunters either collapsed or stumbled where they stood, finally able to breathe again. Claire rushed to Raymond and quickly checked his wounds. Then the core struck the ground, and the silence shattered. Victory finally hit the battlefield. They had taken down an abomination like that, and everyone immediately realized what it meant for their name and status. Praise spread across the field as relief turned into celebration. Cheers burst out from every side. At last, they had won. The battlefield finally grew quiet. Jen remained standing alone for a brief moment, his eyes lowered. At his feet rested half of the monster's shattered inner core, still giving off a faint glow, still carrying an unsettling trace of life, even in its ruined state. The cheers of victory faded into the distance. Something about the aftermath did not feel completely clean. Deep in the forest, a girl watched from behind a tree, hidden from everyone else. Her voice carried a cold tone, almost touched by disappointment, as she looked toward what remained of the Golden Bug's sons. In the end, Derek and Cedric had been no different from their father. Pathetic, useless, easily thrown away. She let out a soft breath, almost as if she pitied them. Then her gaze shifted toward Jen. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she observed him from afar. So that was the man who had fought the abomination. Something about him stood out. It was not only his strength, but also the intent behind the way he moved. Then she noticed it. Jen was reaching for the internal core. A subtle change crossed her expression. Why was he taking it? And more importantly, who exactly was he? In the stillness of the forest at night, Jay remains alone beside a small campfire, holding a glowing monster core with steady calm. After a short glance, he lifts it to his mouth and bites down, chewing it without concern for the danger. The instant it is swallowed, his sight twists. His mind is dragged into a Chuja memoria. A disturbing scene takes shape. A large man is bound tightly to a stone table, his body shaking as he struggles without any chance of escape. A cold presence fills the space, stating that the death of his father, Golden Bug, was nothing more than the result of his own weakness. A woman with a curved figure steps forward. She makes it clear that survival depends on results, that he must prove his value and show he is worth being taken in. The man fights in panic, but there is no mercy. Without pause, she pours a strange blue liquid directly into his eyes. Something unnatural begins. From his eyes, small growths start to push outward, writhing like thin tentacles. The memory cuts off without warning. Jay is forced back into reality, dropping to his knees as nausea hits hard. Sweat runs down his face while he throws up. He forces himself to stay steady, remembering that this reaction, while rare, is not new. Consuming an internal core can grant power, but it can also bring something else. Sometimes, it forces him to take in the monster's memories. These cores carry heavy side effects. He begins to connect what he just saw. That memory might have come from one of Golden Bug's sons. The twisted change, the abnormal form, everything lines up with the idea that humans can be altered by karma. That thought leads to a darker possibility. If those creatures were made like that, then the liquid must have carried karma. And if that is true, then the woman behind it could be a dark priest. Before he can go deeper into it, Claire moves in from behind, pressing that they need to leave right away. She notices his state instantly, picking up on the sweat and his condition, growing suspicious as she considers whether he has eaten another internal core. Jay pauses inside his own thoughts. He weighs whether to speak, but quickly understands how impossible it would be to explain seeing a monster's memories as a side effect. Saying something like that would only bring confusion. So he dismisses it, acting like it is nothing. For now, he keeps it hidden. As he heads back toward the group, unaware of what follows, the same curved woman watches from behind a tree. Her eyes stay fixed on him, filled with interest. She studies him in silence, questioning his intent, drawn to the fact that someone who consumes raw internal cores is moving together with the Order Alliance. She remains lost in thought, questioning whether their next meeting will place them on the same side or turn them into enemies. The scene changes to a grave, the place where Rex was laid to rest. The holy knights and mercenaries gather there while Raymond offers a prayer to Ea, the god of harmony. He speaks about Rex's courage, about how he spent his whole life pursuing peace, and asks that his death not amount to nothing. Jay stands in silence, watching. He thinks back on their single duel and remembers how young Rex had looked, which makes the loss feel even harsher. Then Raymond notices something. A red wolf appears. The moment he sees it, Raymond lowers his head in thanks, taking it as a sign from EA. Jay looks at him in confusion, not understanding the reaction. Raymond explains his belief. In the Order, the red wolf is seen as the closest companion of the god of harmony, and its appearance is taken as proof that EA is offering comfort. Jade, still confused, casually points out that the beast is only his pet. Raymond reacts at once, treating the claim as disrespectful, insisting that a red wolf is a sacred creature and not something any person could tame. Jay understands right away that Raymond does not believe him, so he calls the wolf over. At once, the red wolf responds, moving to him and lowering itself obediently at his side. Raymond is left stunned. Even the Order had failed to tame a creature like that, yet Jay controls it without effort. Then Jay casually explains that after he killed a werewolf, the red wolf simply started following him. That leaves Raymond completely speechless. The red wolf quietly settles beside Rex's grave. After a short silence, Raymond makes a request. Since the wolf has no name, he asks Jay to call it Rex. He explains that referring to such a sacred creature like a stray is not fitting, and more than that, he wants Rex's will, his resolve to stand against evil to continue through that beast. Jay thinks it over for a moment. Then he turns to the wolf and checks whether it accepts that name. The wolf gives a nod. With that, Jay agrees. From that point on, the wolf will be called Rex. Raymond shows clear gratitude. Then another presence arrives from behind. An old man appears with several monks, casually wondering whether he has come at the wrong time. Jay studies him closely and quickly understands that if the man truly holds the rank of elder, then he must stand among the highest authorities in that region. The elder of the third pioneer city has arrived. The mercenary steps aside while the holy knight Raymond greets the newcomer with respect, addressing him properly as elder. The elder apologizes for appearing during a moment of mourning, but Raymond brushes it aside and calmly asks the reason for the visit. The elder explains that he came because the deaths of the Golden Bug Sons now require an investigation. Raymond hesitated, wondering whether the elder still believed the mercenaries were responsible for those deaths. Jay watched in silence and, with some surprise, realized they were the ones being suspected. To him, it was understandable. The client had died while traveling with a massive amount of wealth. With that alone, it was only natural for suspicion to fall on the mercenaries. Raymond insisted that the evidence he had provided should already have been enough, but the elder admitted that while the proof was convincing, one problem still remained. No one had explained how the victims had turned into abominations. He added that he could still feel traces of a dark priest behind the case, then suddenly shifted his attention toward Jay. Jay was taken aback, wondering how the elder even knew his name. Suspicion rose in his mind, and he directly questioned whether the elder believed he was a dark priest. The elder gave no answer. The scene then moved to the third pioneer city, inside the training grounds of Vritra Arena, where Jay stood together with the elder and Raymond. The elder began laying out his reasoning. Those with great power usually showed signs of talent from an early age. Jay's, however, had appeared from nowhere, and in a short time, had achieved one shocking feat after another. On top of that, he had been involved in the abomination incident by strange coincidence. From the elder's point of view, that made Jay deeply suspicious, even by his own standards. Jay answered in a calm way, noticing that people in that place seemed to keep a close eye on anyone strong. With that in mind, he admitted it was not strange that he would look suspicious, especially since he was not from that world. Even so, Jay still could not see what any of that had to do with sparring. He did not understand why the elder kept pushing for it. Raymond stepped in and sided with Jay, pointing out that Jay had only just come out of a fight and was far from being in top shape. Jay backed that up, but the elder only let out a small laugh and questioned whether they were refusing to cooperate with the investigation. Raymond found the elder completely unreasonable, while Jay ended up cornered by the situation. He could not just strike someone who suspected him of being a dark priest, especially when that person was an old man. The whole thing felt troublesome from every angle. The elder noticed Jay's hesitation and mocked him, suggesting that his concern came only from seeing an old man in front of him. Then, without any warning, a fierce martial aura burst out from the elder as he made it clear that his place as elder had been earned by strength alone. In the next instant, he moved. Jay barely caught the movement before the elder attacked with his bare hand, using a technique called the Great Bell Strike. The blow forced a cough out of him and sent him flying into the wall at the corner. Raymond watched with worry and quickly warned that the Vritra monks were martial artists with overwhelming combat power, and that the elder stood above all of them. As the elder rushed in again, Raymond urged Jay not to lower his guard for even a moment. The elder laughed and accused Raymond of taking Jay's side too much. He warned that if Raymond kept favoring him like that, jealousy might set in and make him lose control of his power. Jay barely avoided the next blow. A small trace of surprise crossed the elder's face, impressed that Jay had managed to evade it. At the same time, Jay's mind started moving fast. The elder had stopped his blade with bare hands, and that strike had hit the exact same place where the abomination had wounded him. Then something fell into place. Jay realized his body had fully recovered. The injuries he had taken in the fight against the abomination should have left him battered for at least 2 weeks, yet they were gone. Even the damage from the elder's latest attack was already closing up. That led him to one conclusion. Maybe eating the monster core had given him abilities close to the abomination's own. A grin spread across his face as he understood what that meant. It was a complete jackpot. Without delay, he launched his counterattack. The elder, stirred by the exchange, remarked that Jay hardly looked like someone who had just come out of battle injured. What Jay showed only pushed him even further. Still, deep down, the elder admitted that, although he would have liked to keep exchanging blows, he held himself back. He had already confirmed the rumors about Jay's strength. Now it was time for the next step. The elder formed a hand sign and activated his mind's eye. For a brief moment, the past surfaced. It showed how he had gained that power by emptying himself completely, even giving up his physical sight to awaken a third eye. Back in the present, the mind's eye opened, an ability that could pierce straight into the core of the soul. Inside Jay's mental world, the elder sought the truth, trying to determine whether Jay was a dark priest or a rising light. At first he saw a creature like a praying mantis and ordered it to withdraw, but when he looked deeper, shock took hold. Jay's mental world was filled with countless monsters. When the elder returned to reality, Jay steadied him, placing a hand on his shoulder and checking whether he was all right. He quickly noticed that the elder's mana could no longer be felt. The elder, visibly shaken, reflected on what he had seen. It had been a world far beyond unpleasant, something truly horrifying, and it was the first time he had ever witnessed anything like it. Jay's mental world had not broken apart, and that alone proved he was not a dark priest. With that settled, the elder brought his hands together and gave a sincere apology, asking Jay to forgive his behavior and explaining that confirming his identity had been extremely important. Jay, caught off guard by the sudden change, tried to understand what had just happened. At that moment, footsteps sounded from behind. A woman came forward and explained that the reason for all of this was simple. She wanted to entrust Jay with a mission connected to the Dark Priest. When Jay asked who she was, she introduced herself properly as Cindy, the youngest daughter of the Golden Bug. The scene shifted to a thick forest, where Jay stood beside Cindy and the elder, surrounded by an uneasy silence. Cindy began to explain that this was not the first time an abomination had appeared. Lately, with the third pioneer city at the center of it all, many people had been turning into abominations. Even the nearby forests were being corrupted at a rapid pace, changing into part of the demonic realm. Jay repeated the thought in his mind, trying to grasp how serious the situation had become. Then Cindy stated that they had arrived. Ahead of them, several monks stood guard around a strange object called the Rift Core, a thing that spread the demonic realm. Any place where a rift core appeared would slowly be twisted into that same corrupted domain. The monks continued their chanting without pause, offering prayers and begging for mercy over the land. Jay watched in silence and understood that purifying a rift core was far from simple. He then turned to Cindy and asked whether the power of karma was supposed to grow weaker the farther one moved away from the Northern Empire. Cindy confirmed that he was right. From that, Jay reached a clear conclusion. For something like this to be happening, someone had to be behind it. Cindy confirmed it. A dark priest. She explained that if the number of abominations and rift cores kept increasing at this speed, the third pioneer city, built through enormous effort, would be placed in serious danger. The elder added that, in the worst case, the entire city could be lost. That was why they had spent so much effort searching for the dark priest's hideout, and they had finally found a location suspected to be the enemy's base. With that, the elder asked Jay to join an extermination operation in 2 weeks. Cindy added that the reward would be at the highest level possible. Jay stayed quiet for a moment while his thoughts moved fast. This was the real reason they had come looking for him. It was a request made by people with real weight behind their names. The elder of the third pioneer city and the only surviving descendant of the golden bug. A request from people with that much influence. For the first time, Jay felt that he had truly been recognized. The scene shifted again. A huge Tartak moved forward with heavy steps, carrying the mercenaries' luggage as they traveled. Claire let out a breath of relief and admitted how worried she had been. If Jay had been branded as a dark priest, death would have been certain, and from what she had heard, people like that were subjected to brutal torture. Jay reacted with clear shock at the idea of being tortured. Then Claire pointed ahead and announced that they had arrived. Before them stood a massive city, Wall City Yurgis, far beyond the scale of any pioneer city. It was known as the safest place in the world. Jay stared at it, and briefly wondered whether he might one day live there himself, but he quickly pushed that thought away. This was not the time for that. He then turned toward Raymond and called for his attention. Raymond looked back and ordered the group to take a short rest. Everyone settled down in their places. That was when Jonathan reacted in surprise, questioning Jay's sudden choice to head for the third pioneer city. Jay explained that he had accepted a new request. Jonathan found it sudden, though he admitted that separating after a completed job was normal in their kind of work. Even so, it still left a bitter feeling. Jay agreed, then asked what the others planned to do next. Jonathan answered with his usual easygoing mood and familiar thumbs up, making it clear that his plan was to drink, and then keep drinking. One of his companions quickly agreed, intending to do the exact same thing. Jay could only shake his head at them before turning to Claire and asking about her plan. Claire admitted that she would need to find another job. The money from this mission had been decent, but it was still nowhere near enough for the goal she had in mind, getting into the magic tower. Jay asked about it, and Claire explained that even though she called herself a mage, most of what she knew was still basic. Her abilities had barely moved past beginner level. She had no trouble surviving, but her ambition had grown, and she wanted to learn higher-level magic. That was why she had been saving money to enter the magic tower, a place where advanced magic could be studied. Jay compared it in his mind to a kind of magical university and found her resolve impressive. After a short pause, he reached into his bag, pulled out his money pouch, and offered it to her, asking whether it would be enough. Claire froze, unable to understand what he meant. Jay made it clear that the money was meant to help her enter the magic tower. She immediately refused, saying she could never accept something like that. To her, it felt far too shameless. Jay calmly explained that he was not handing it over for nothing. He believed he owed her, and this was his way of paying back that debt, a gift. Even Jonathan was stunned by how much money it was. Claire hesitated, overwhelmed by it, but Jay had already placed the pouch in her hands. He simply told her that they would meet again. Her eyes filled with tears as she thanked him and promised that she would repay the kindness no matter what. Jay then said his farewell to everyone and told them to stay safe. Jonathan answered with confidence, signaling that they would be all right. Jay gave them one last look, then turned and walked on, leaving the group behind while their cheers followed him from a distance. Nearby, the red wolf, Rex, stood beside Raymond. Jonathan gently said his goodbye to it as well. Without any hesitation, Rex turned around and followed after Jay. The scene shifted to a new location where several soldiers were gathered near a fortress. From above, Cindy and an elder quietly watched Jay from afar. Cindy remarked that although she had claimed nothing would happen, the way the elder had stormed out earlier made it seem he was worried. The elder dismissed her comment, asking what she meant. Cindy clarified she was referring to Jay. The elder himself had admitted that Jay appeared to have absorbed a core. The elder replied that simply absorbing a core did not automatically make someone a dark priest. Cindy let out a dry laugh, calling it a dangerous assumption. According to common knowledge, anyone who absorbed a core would eventually become intoxicated by power and lose their sense of self. Her tone shifted as she addressed the elder, not as master, but as elder himself. She asked honestly whether he was protecting Jay because he still hoped there was some humanity left within him, or some mystery person. Elder, remember a mysterious masked figure who silently stood in the shadows. The elder refused to continue the conversation, but Cindy apologized if she had overstepped. Even so, she made her position clear. For now, she would keep the matter secret, but if Jay ever did anything suspicious, she would personally expose him as a dark priest. When that happened, even the elder who vouched for Jay would be in trouble. After saying she turned and walked away, he knew it wouldn't end well for him. Quietly, the elder mumbled to himself that such a thing would never happen. In his mind's eye, he remembered witnessing Jay absorb countless cores and grow incredibly powerful, making his strength almost impossible to measure. Yet, despite all this, Jay's mindscape hadn't collapsed. Undeniable proof that Jay had retained his humanity even after absorbing so many cores. That was why they were keeping the truth hidden for now. The world wasn't ready to accept it. Meanwhile, Jay walked with the soldiers of the 1st Expeditionary Force. One soldier loudly recited a battle prayer about times to love and hate, peace and fighting. He dramatically pointed at his own hand, saying faith had ordered him to draw his sword and eradicate evil. Right beside them, Jay calmly smashed a stone against his head. The surrounding soldiers froze in shock as whispers spread among them, staring at him in disbelief. Jay casually counted upward while the wound on his head healed before their eyes. He realized that after finally absorbing another core, he had gained regeneration. Minor bruises and shallow wounds took about 10 minutes to heal, and a fracture caused by a beast had fully healed within 2 days. This made him wonder how far the ability could go. If his arm were ripped off entirely, could it regenerate within a month? The more convinced he became that consuming monster cores was worth it, the harder he couldn't wait to test the ability in real combat. One of the expedition soldiers awkwardly admitted hearing about the Skull Crusher nickname before, but never imagining it referred to someone literally smashing their own skull. Jay apologized for startling them, explaining he had simply wanted to test something. Then they met Roland, Supreme Commander of the Expeditionary Force and a member of the Order of Harmony. Roland enthusiastically declared that he liked geniuses like Jay, insisting true geniuses had unique qualities. Jay awkwardly wondered why he was always called a genius. Roland explained that anyone personally recommended by Elder Ball had to be extraordinary. Internally, Jay groaned. He wanted nothing to do with this overly energetic commander. Roland asked about the actual plan. Immediately, Roland praised him again for thinking like a genius before explaining their operation. Their destination was the forest north of the 3rd Pioneer City. First, they would eliminate the rift cores near the entrance and then push directly toward the center. Depending on the situation, the battle could vary in length, but the goal was to finish everything within 10 days. Jay found that excessive. The forest wasn't even that large. Roland laughed, saying this was exactly why Jay was a genius. Under normal circumstances, 10 days would indeed be enough. But before he could finish speaking, a mole-like creature suddenly burst from the ground and attacked. Roland calmly stated that the rift cores had expanded the territory of demonic beasts. Normally staying deep within the curse lands, these creatures were now appearing openly in areas like this. He admitted honestly that even 10 days might not be enough anymore. Suddenly, movement rippled beneath the soil. The soldiers immediately recognized it as an ambush and prepared for battle. As numerous beasts burst from underground, Jay instantly recognized them as bloodsucker rats and was shocked to discover they could dig through the earth. Roland barked orders, warning everyone to fight while protecting their backs. Turning one's back on these creatures meant certain death. He shouted toward Jay, warning him to be careful. But Jay had already been isolated. The bloodsucker rats completely surrounded him and lunged in from every direction. Yet instead of retaliating immediately, Jay remained calm. Roland stared in disbelief, demanding to know what he was doing and whether he had gone insane. The moment the rats blocked everyone's view of him, Jay finally moved as the creatures shrieked around him. He began slaughtering them while devouring their cores one after another. Inside his mind, excitement surged. If he consumed all of them, would he gain the bloodsucker rat's abilities? Tunneling itself. Jay didn't find the cores very useful, but that mattered little anymore. The demonic beasts before him no longer looked scary. They just appeared as walking cores surrounded by dead monsters. Jay grabbed one core after another and started eating them, searching for inheritance abilities. He knew that consuming monster essence had a small chance of giving him the magical beast's powers. This secret was why he survived 12 years in the demonic realm. After eating dozens of cores, Jay felt something. By his count, he had already consumed about 40. He wondered if he had finally inherited the bloodsucker rat's digging ability. Suddenly, someone reached out to him. A soldier shouted, asking if the mercenary was okay. Jay quickly told him to stay back, saying it was dangerous and that they should maintain formation because he was fine. Internally, though, he cursed the interruption. At this rate, he wouldn't be able to secretly consume mana cores anymore. The soldier ignored the warning and pulled Jay out of the swarm, reassuring him they were safe now. At that moment, the holy choir began playing a powerful melody. Roland and his subordinates raised their violins, weakening the bloodsucker rats at the same time. The soldiers felt a surge of energy as cores flowed through their bodies, increasing their resistance and defense dramatically. Morale instantly soared. Jay realized this was the effect of the holy choir support buff. More importantly, he had misunderstood Roland. He thought the commander was a swordsman, but turned out to be a support-type fighter. The expedition soldiers roared as they launched their counterattack, cutting down the bloodsucker rats one by one. Once the battle ended, the soldiers gathered to record the results. Officials explained that records would determine everyone's rewards, so cooperation was needed. Meanwhile, several soldiers stared at Jay in confusion. First, he had smashed his own head with a rock, then recklessly charged into monsters, and now he was digging through dirt like a madman. Ignoring their strange looks, Jay continued digging while muttering to himself in disappointment. It seemed Roland approached him, asking if he was okay after all. Jay apologized for worrying him, but Roland waved it off, saying the battle was amazing. He admitted that when Jay charged into the monsters alone, he genuinely thought Jay would die. However, the final results showed otherwise. Roland revealed that Jay had killed 267 bloodsucker rats by himself. An average soldier managed only 4 or 5 kills, and even holy knights usually defeated around 100 to 150. This was further proof of Genius's incredible abilities. Inside, Jay groaned at the constant talk about geniuses. If he hadn't spent so much time secretly eating mana cores, things could have turned disastrous. Trying to change the topic, Jay asked Roland if he was actually a support-type fighter. Roland looked genuinely confused and wondered if Jay thought supports were inferior. Jay clarified that he had imagined Roland as someone obsessed with overwhelming power, so the reality surprised him. Roland laughed and admitted that Jay's assumption wasn't entirely wrong. He originally wanted to become a swordsman too, but chose his role because it would help the world most. His swordsmanship was only slightly above average, but his musical talent was among the very best. Proudly, he declared he was exceptionally skilled with music. Jay reconsidered his impression of Roland beneath all the constant chatter about geniuses. Roland was actually a far better person than he had expected. Interested, Jay asked if Roland could demonstrate some of his musical abilities. Roland happily agreed. The night quietly passed as they continued marching deeper into the demonic domain, destroying rift cores and fighting kobolds and bigger beasts. Roland reminded everyone that the deeper they advanced, the stronger the monsters would become. He asked about the soldiers' morale, surprised by how much more motivated they were than at the beginning of the expedition. The reason for Jay's actions quickly became clear. Whenever monsters appeared, he would rush forward and deal with them almost alone. At that moment, he swiftly cut down blue goblins in one move before instantly killing a large rabbit-like creature right after. He then consumed its core. Moments later, disappointment showed on his face again. Another failed inheritance. Inside Roland's tent, a soldier explained that Jay's outstanding performance kept morale high. Roland laughed, joking with his executives about how embarrassing it was to be outperformed by just a mercenary. However, one executive argued that the soldiers had become too relaxed and deserved great rewards despite contributing less. Roland saw no problem with this. Thanks to Jay, few were injured. If monsters this strong appeared, they must be close to their goal. For now, they should rest. In a hidden dungeon-like structure deep within, towering spires dominated the area. Serious individuals gathered together. One asked why members of the Order of Harmony approached. Another demanded how their location was discovered. A curvy woman calmly replied that with so many rift cores scattered around, it would have been strange if no one noticed. Still, she believed their young star had predicted this outcome. Their chosen prodigy could never be incompetent. Nearby, a man in a pointed hat reassured everyone that defenders always held the advantage over attackers. The enemy's response merely arrived slightly faster than expected, but only slightly. No matter what happened, the great plan of darkness couldn't be interrupted. Back with Roland's expedition party, they continued marching deeper into demonic territory. Eventually, they reached what seemed to be a dead end. Roland stared ahead in disbelief. Although he had seen many insane things before, this was something else entirely. Before them stretched an enormous pit far below, gigantic spider-like beasts lurking in the darkness. Standing at the edge of the abyss, Roland turned to a holy priest and asked if this was truly their destination. The priest confirmed it without hesitation, explaining that the corrupt energy of the demonic realm was heavily concentrated there. Roland stared into the pit. He couldn't believe it when he admitted they had never heard of such an unnatural place. Jay quietly looked around, then noted something felt odd. Roland asked what was strange about it. Jay explained that usually high ground gave an advantage in battles, but here the enemy had dug a huge pit and set up their base underground. Roland suggested maybe to avoid being seen, but Jay countered that tunnels would have been better for hiding. After thinking, Jay realized there might be a trap. Jay said this was likely true. Suddenly, loud noises echoed behind them. Screaming soldiers were thrown into the air. One shouted in terror as a giant creature appeared. Bigfoot, a monstrous beast standing 4 to 7 meters tall with immense strength. Another monster, Salmosa, a snake-like creature with tough skin and deadly venom, slithered out too. Bigfoot smashed its huge hand into the ground, breaking it beneath soldiers' feet and sending them flying. Some were thrown directly into an abyss where giant spiders waited to eat them. Roland cursed loudly as chaos spread. He ordered everyone to focus on the Bigfoot first. Some soldiers said they couldn't handle such large monsters. Roland urgently told the Holy Choir to cast support spells quickly. Jay stepped forward, excited. The Bigfoot charged at him, but Jay dodged and retreated, drawing the monster away from the main battlefield. Roland and the soldiers watched as Jay and the creature disappeared deeper into the abyss. Jay realized he was facing the largest of the pack, the strongest one. Instead of fear, Jay grinned. The two creatures plunged together into the abyss. Just before reaching the bottom, Jay used his sword like a hook to stop his fall mid-air. Nearby spiderwebs stretched across the pit. Jay used these advantages to move through the air, analyzing his opponent. The Bigfoot had good mobility and close combat strength, plus ranged attacks from a snake wrapped around its arm. Jay saw all of these as very useful. He swung using spiderweb-like strands, rushing forward at full speed toward the creature. As he fought, he carefully observed. Normally, when two monsters fight together, their strengths don't just add up, they multiply. But each monster had a weakness. Just like it was hard for Jay to face two opponents at once, it was equally tough for the Bigfoot to synchronize its movements perfectly. Eventually, instinct would override teamwork. That moment came as Jay slipped into the Bigfoot's blind spot and attacked. The Bigfoot instinctively used the snake to block, but Jay slashed through the snake in one swing. A grin appeared on his face. He had caught them both off guard. Jay's blade flashed again, cleanly slicing the Bigfoot's head. Both monsters fell lifelessly. Jay calmly said the creature was a decent gatekeeper. Then he sensed an unusual surge of mana from the snake monster's core. It gave him a strange feeling, but he ignored it and consumed it anyway. As soon as he absorbed it, he realized he could now instinctively tell which monster cores had inheritance abilities. After devouring so many cores, he was gaining bizarre powers. Excited, Jay prepared to check his new ability. Suddenly, a fireball exploded near him, engulfing him entirely. Nearby, a man with a pointed hat laughed mockingly at Jay for acting relaxed in enemy territory. The man's expression froze as Jay casually walked out of the flames unharmed. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, Jay sighed, disappointed that he hadn't gained the poison ability this time. Jay studied the new power he had just gained and quickly understood that it was not the ability he had originally hoped for. Even so, it appeared extremely useful. As he considered it, he began to suspect that this inheritance might have been the reason he had managed to stop the fire attack earlier. Regardless of the answer, the ability was clearly worth exploring further. Before he could focus on it any longer, another fireball came flying straight toward him. This time, Jay pulled out his sword and cut directly through the flames. The fight was nowhere near finished. The man wearing the pointed hat watched in disbelief after seeing his attack stopped for a second time. A thought slowly formed in his mind. He began to wonder if this was the infamous madman rumored to roam among humans while consuming monster cores. If that was truly the case, the Dark Priest decided he could no longer hold back. At that moment, spider-like legs burst from behind his back as he rushed toward Jay. Jay immediately recognized the power as an inheritance. The Dark Priest had most likely gained that ability after consuming the core of a spider-type monster. The Dark Priest admitted that he had wanted to fight Jay for a very long time, and found it hard to believe that Jay had appeared before him so easily. The opportunity pleased him so much that he felt close to tears. Soon after, more spiders started gathering around him. Jay narrowed his eyes as he realized the Dark Priest had not arrived alone. The surrounding spiders suddenly released both flames and poison at the same time. Jay swung his sword and knocked away the attacks, but the instant the two forces met, a massive explosion erupted. Even Jay was stunned by the destructive force created from the combination. The blast was so powerful that people above the pit noticed it immediately. On the upper ground, Roland looked down in shock after witnessing the explosion. Far below, Jay barely survived by absorbing most of the impact, though he suffered significant damage in the process. The Dark Priest praised him, amazed that anyone could withstand such an attack directly. At that point, he questioned whether Jay could still be considered human. Meanwhile, Jay rapidly examined the situation. The poison gas and flames had mixed together, creating an explosion far more dangerous than either attack on its own. Even with his stone skin ability, the damage was becoming difficult to endure. At that moment, Jay completely confirmed his suspicion. The enemy before him was unquestionably a Dark Priest. Just as expected, Dark Priests were opponents that could never be taken lightly. Without giving Jay a chance to recover, the Dark Priest rushed forward and challenged him in close combat. Jay barely managed to block the incoming attacks before striking back with an aura sword slash. At the same time, the spiders behind the Dark Priest continuously fired poison and flames toward him. Trapped between both assaults, Jay found himself being pushed into an increasingly dangerous situation. He knew the spiders should probably be eliminated first, but accomplishing that would not be simple while the Dark Priest continued applying relentless pressure. The fire attacks had already caused serious damage to his internal organs. Both his regeneration and stone skin abilities were approaching their limits. He could not keep enduring this for much longer. Even then, the Dark Priest refused to slow down and continued attacking without interruption. Jay quietly remarked that there was only one option left. Before he could finish, one of the Dark Priest's spider legs pierced straight through his body. The Dark Priest laughed with great interest. At last, he understood why the others had left Jay alone. Not only had Jay blocked his attacks with what the Dark Priest mockingly viewed as a crude skill, but he had also made use of mana arts. To the Dark Priest, Jay was far too valuable to be killed so easily. After pulling the spider leg out of Jay's body, he suddenly presented an offer. He proposed that Jay join the ranks of the Dark Priests. If he accepted, his life would be spared. From the Dark Priest's perspective, it was a reasonable deal. He claimed that those who gained abilities through monster cores became different from ordinary people. However, normal humans feared that kind of power. Eventually, they would try to suppress it and brand anyone who possessed it as a Dark Priest. According to him, Jay would eventually face the same outcome. The only reason Jay remained accepted for now was because of his connection to the Order Alliance. But once people learned that he used the power of monster cores, would they still consider him human? The Dark Priest stretched out his hand and encouraged Jay to stand alongside others who shared the same fate. Together, they could grow stronger and obtain even greater power. Jay rejected the proposal without hesitation. With clear contempt, he questioned why someone like the Dark Priest talked so much. The Dark Priest's face immediately darkened. It became obvious that Jay would need to be taught a lesson. At the same time, Jay quietly admitted that he had truly wanted to avoid using this power. Unfortunately, the situation had left him with no alternative. Dark red mana suddenly burst from his body as his appearance slowly began to change. For the first time, genuine shock appeared on the Dark Priest's face. Surrounded by a violent crimson aura, Jay coldly remarked that the Dark Priest should at least say something reasonable. Then he revealed his new inheritance form. At the same time, he made one thing perfectly clear. A wolf could never serve a dog. The Dark Priest stared at Jay's transformed figure in disbelief. He wondered whether Jay had been concealing this level of power the entire time. Realizing the danger, he immediately ordered the spiders to attack. He commanded them to reduce Jay to ashes. Jay answered by activating Heavenly Punishment. Black lightning filled with a dark aura descended from above and crashed directly into the swarm. The strike completely erased the spiders and swallowed the dark priest as well. Although he survived, he was barely able to remain standing. Only then did he fully understand the enormous difference between their strengths. The dark priest could not even imagine what kind of monster core Jay had consumed to obtain such terrifying power. Whatever the answer was, one thing had become obvious. Remaining there meant death. He immediately decided to run. However, the moment he turned around, Jay was already standing behind him. The dark priest froze in shock. He had not even seen Jay move. Before he could react, Jay grabbed one of the spider legs and ripped it off. Then he tore away another. Painful screams spread through the area as the dark priest desperately searched for a way to escape, fully aware that force alone would not save him. He quickly tried a different approach. Attempting to negotiate, he urged Jay to stop and discuss the situation. According to him, both of them had consumed monster cores. If they cooperated, they could build something that benefited them both. Jay showed no interest whatsoever. The only thing he wanted was information about the other dark priests. The dark priest could not understand his behavior. He pointed out that Jay possessed the same type of power they did. Eventually, humanity would abandon him as well. So he could not understand why Jay continued standing on their side. Jay calmly responded that none of that answered his question. Panic slowly crept into the dark priest as he promised that he would cooperate. However, before he could continue speaking, Jay's hand drove straight through his body. Staring at him without emotion, Jay reminded him that he had only been given a single opportunity. Consumed by hatred, the dark priest cursed Jay with the last of his strength before his body slowly scattered into the air. With the fight finally finished, Jay's transformed form faded away. The moment it disappeared, blood began pouring from his eyes and nose as he collapsed onto the ground. The strain placed on his body had been much greater than he had anticipated. That was exactly why he disliked using that power. Even a short activation placed a tremendous burden on him. As his consciousness gradually slipped away, he noticed Roland approaching from afar. A sense of relief soon replaced his concerns. In the end, everything seemed to have worked out. By the time Roland reached him, Jay was barely awake. Roland immediately ordered his men to bring a stretcher. As he looked around at the devastation covering the area, he could only wonder what kind of battle had taken place below. Sometime later, back in the third pioneer city, Jay finally opened his eyes. The first thing he understood was that he was still alive. A nearby nurse immediately hurried off to inform the others that the mercenary had regained consciousness. Not long afterward, Roland rushed into the room. Clearly relieved to see him awake, he informed Jay that he had remained unconscious for 3 full days. The news caught Jay by surprise. Even with the regeneration ability he had recently obtained, the backlash from the transformation had obviously been far more serious than expected. He quickly asked about the expedition. Roland explained that most of the surrounding rift cores had been eliminated and that casualties had remained low. He openly acknowledged that much of that success was thanks to Jay. Jay jokingly remarked that a generous reward would be sufficient compensation. At the same time, he quietly admitted to himself that he never got tired of receiving recognition for his work. Before the conversation could continue, an officer from the Order Alliance entered the room. He explained that he had come to record Jay's testimony regarding the expedition. The Alliance wanted a complete account of the enemy he had fought and the events that had occurred during the battle. When Jay questioned why such details were necessary, the officer explained that the battlefield had been extremely chaotic. Based on the reports they had collected, it was difficult to believe that the conflict had simply been a fight between a human and a monster. The moment he heard that explanation, Jay immediately realized that suspicion still surrounded him. The brief relief he had felt vanished. He began wondering what kind of explanation he could possibly come up with. Before he could respond, Elder Bao suddenly entered and declared that he would personally take responsibility for the matter. The officer questioned what exactly he meant. However, Elder Bao's answer made it clear that there was no room for argument. When the officer continued pushing the issue, the elder repeated himself in a much colder voice and ordered him to leave. Unwilling to challenge him any further, the officer immediately backed down and departed. Jay thanked Elder Bao for stepping in. He admitted that he had been concerned people might misunderstand the situation, especially since he had only just awakened. Privately, Jay found it strange how much attention the elder had shown him ever since their first meeting. Elder Bao calmly assured him that there was no reason to worry. No matter what form Jay possessed, he had already chosen to trust him. Confused by those words, Jay was about to ask for an explanation. Before he could speak, Elder Bao revealed something that had been hidden in his possession. The instant Jay saw it, his eyes widened in shock. The object was a monster core. Elder Bao explained that it had been recovered from the Dark Priest's body. Instead of turning it over to the Alliance, he had secretly replaced it and kept the real one for himself. For some reason, he had felt that Jay might have a use for it. Sometime later, Jay was given a new set of clothes and tried them on. The difference became obvious immediately. They felt nothing like ordinary clothing. Elder Bao looked at him and remarked that the outfit suited him well. Jay admitted that the experience went far beyond simple comfort. The material felt as if it had become part of his body. If he had known custom-made clothes felt this good, he would have gotten them much sooner. Elder Bao laughed and told him not to be impressed just because he had worn them. According to him, comfort was not the true value of those clothes. Before Jay could ask for an explanation, the elder suddenly threw an aura-powered punch directly at him. The attack struck him squarely in the body. Jay immediately reacted in shock. His first thought was whether the old man had seriously punched someone who had just spent 3 days unconscious. However, something quickly felt strange. Despite taking the hit directly, he barely felt any pain. Elder Bao explained that the outfit was actually a relic. Relics were rare and costly items infused with magic. Although the suit weighed little more than normal beast hide, its defensive power greatly surpassed that of standard plate armor. Naturally, Jay asked whether an item like that cost a fortune. Elder Bao confirmed that it did. Some relics were so rare that even having enough gold did not guarantee obtaining one. Before they could continue discussing it, Cindy suddenly arrived carrying a large chest. She opened it, revealing a huge pile of gold coins. According to her, the reward belonged to Jay. The payment for the mission totaled 2,400 gold coins. Even Jay was stunned by the amount. He immediately questioned whether it was truly acceptable to give him so much money. Elder Bao replied that every coin had been earned. Throughout the expedition, Jay had hunted countless monsters. He had also played a major role in dealing with both the Rift Cores and the Dark Priest. His achievements were far beyond ordinary, making the reward completely justified. Cindy then revealed that she had secretly added a little extra from her own pocket. Jay could only admire how absurdly large the reward had become. Even so, one question continued bothering him. He asked why they were treating him so well. After all, excessive kindness often raised suspicion. Looking at both of them, Jay reminded them that they already knew he consumed monster cores. Under normal circumstances, that fact alone should have made people cautious around him. Hearing that, Elder Bao simply laughed. He remarked that even when he treated Jay well, the young man still managed to make things difficult for him. Meanwhile, deep inside the pit where the battle had taken place, several soldiers stood watch throughout the night. At one point, one of the guards suddenly claimed that he had seen something move. His companion immediately dismissed it as nothing more than the wind. However, the first soldier insisted that something had definitely shifted in the darkness. Before he could finish speaking, a chain suddenly shot out from the shadows and wrapped around his neck. The soldier died instantly. A crazed laugh echoed throughout the pit. The remaining guard immediately shouted into the darkness, demanding to know who was there. Moments later, he suffered the same fate. Silence returned once again. Then several figures slowly stepped out from the darkness. They were dark priests. One of the women surveyed the battlefield and remarked that their youngest member had been defeated by a group of such incompetent fools. The former Enoch had proven himself to be completely useless. A blonde-haired man commented that perhaps the opponents had been stronger than the low-ranking knights assigned to guard the area. Another man wearing a mask merely shrugged. In his opinion, it made no difference. He had expected Enoch to fail from the very beginning. As far as their objectives were concerned, Enoch had already fulfilled his role. The female dark priest questioned whether he had foreseen this outcome all along. The masked man paid no attention to the question. Instead, he placed his hand against a nearby stone wall. Then he suggested that it was time for them to move as well. At that moment, a strange symbol appeared beneath his palm. The markings spread across the rock and began glowing. Moments later, the stone wall shifted, revealing a hidden passage. The masked man then revealed that the time had finally come to put their plan into motion. It was a plan created for a single purpose: the destruction of humanity. Beyond the hidden passage, several people were strapped to large stone tables. Nearby stood containers filled with a mysterious blue liquid. Meanwhile, back at the third Pioneer Mansion, Elder Bao sat together with Jean and Cindy. After a short silence, The elder admitted that he was not in a position to criticize Jean. Instead, he wished to ask a favor. He wanted Jean to use his extraordinary power for the benefit of humanity. Hearing those words, Jean could not help thinking back to his previous fears. For a long time, he had believed that if people ever learned he consumed monster cores, they would see him as a monster. The possibility that they would instead ask him to use that power to help humanity was something he had never imagined. Looking back on everything, he could only feel thankful. Jean then asked whether anyone else knew his secret. Elder Bao shook his head and explained that, for the moment, only the two of them were aware of it. Cindy quickly pointed out that most people would probably not react as calmly as they had. Jean admitted that she was likely correct. He then asked how exactly he could be of help. In response, Elder Bao placed the Dark Priest's monster core onto the table. He explained that consuming a monster core occasionally allowed a person to inherit fragments of the monster's memories. Normally, the chances of that happening were extremely low. However, when the monster had once been human, the probability increased greatly. The explanation immediately triggered a realization in Jean's mind. That was why he had experienced the memories of Golden Bus's sons before. Everything finally became clear. The elder wanted him to consume the Dark Priest's monster core and search through those memories for information related to the Dark Priests. After explaining the plan, Elder Bao left the decision entirely up to him. Internally, Jean was already satisfied with the situation. Not only had he finally found people he could speak with openly, but he was also being given the very monster core he had missed because he lost consciousness after the battle. Jean let out a sigh and accepted what seemed to be his unavoidable duty, for the greater good, naturally. The moment he swallowed the monster core, a flood of memories immediately rushed into his mind. Jean soon found himself reliving fragments of Enoch's past. Within the memory, Enoch desperately pleaded before a female dark priest, hoping to be chosen. He had grown tired of living as a failure. More than anything else, he desired real power, the kind of overwhelming strength that could change everything. The woman simply watched him in silence. After a moment, she handed him a container filled with a strange blue liquid. She then instructed him to prove himself. Not long afterward, the memory came to an end. Back in the present, Elder Bao and Cindy immediately asked whether Jean was all right. After taking a moment to sort through the memories he had just experienced, Jean assured them that he was fine. However, the vision had given him something valuable. He had learned an important piece of information. More importantly, he had uncovered the Dark Priest's next plan. The elder locked his eyes on Jay and studied him carefully, asking whether he was truly certain. Jay gave his confirmation without the slightest pause. According to him, the battle had only served as a distraction. The Dark Priest had been working toward a completely different objective from the beginning. He explained everything in a direct manner. After every expedition, one tradition had remained untouched without exception. That tradition was the Archbishop's banquet. That gathering was the real target. Their actual intention was to launch an attack there and eliminate every high-ranking official assembled inside. The elder's face grew serious. He noted that the banquet was protected by heavy security. He questioned whether the Dark Priests truly possessed that much military force. Jay admitted that he had been unable to determine their exact numbers. A man hidden behind an iron mask had been there, along with the woman tied to the deaths of the Golden Bug's sons. Those two individuals alone represented a major fighting force. The elder remained quiet for a short while, carefully considering everything he had heard. Cindy then voiced her thoughts. From her perspective, the situation was far too risky for them to manage by themselves. She insisted that the Order Alliance should be informed immediately and that the banquet should be called off. The elder responded with a slow shake of his head. That approach was unacceptable. Informing the Order Alliance would expose the fact that Jay consumed monster cores. If that information surfaced, suspicion could easily fall on them instead, branding them as Dark Priests. In addition, canceling the banquet would not truly solve the problem. The Dark Priests would simply switch to another plan, leaving everyone back where they started. Jay asked what course of action remained. The elder answered in a calm and measured way. They would make use of the information Jay had delivered. If they already knew the rats were on their way, all that remained was to prepare the trap waiting for them. Sometime later, warmth and candlelight filled the banquet hall. Jay entered the venue dressed in a tailored suit, looking completely different from the blood-covered mercenary everyone had seen during the expedition. The murmurs started almost at once. Guests quietly exchanged comments among themselves. Many wondered whether he was truly the mercenary who had played such a major role during the expedition. Others were surprised by how young he appeared. Some questioned whether he was really as strong as the stories suggested. One woman looked at him with interest while her companion wondered if she should approach him and start a conversation. Before Jay could move much farther, a familiar voice reached him from behind. Roland walked over with a broad grin, commenting that the genius of the day had finally decided to appear after everything had already ended. He laughed openly, admitting that he had genuinely believed Jay had died during the expedition. Jay turned toward Roland with a faint grin, wondering if he had actually been worried about him. He apologized for the trouble and the circumstances that had kept him away. Roland brushed it aside with a laugh, understanding that the battle had been far from easy. What interested him more was something else entirely. He stepped closer, curious about the situation. It seemed their genius had gotten himself involved in an unusual story. With a subtle gesture, he indicated a man standing nearby. The figure was an inquisitor. Jay let out a quiet breath. That man was taking his duties very seriously. The source of the suspicion was simple. Jay was too powerful. Roland remarked that those who had never even joined the expedition had no reason to act so distrustful. He apologized on behalf of the Order Alliance and encouraged Jay not to dwell on it. Nothing could erase the fact that he had fought for countless people. Jay expressed his sincere gratitude. At that moment, a formal announcement echoed across the hall. The Archbishop had arrived. Every gaze shifted toward Archbishop Conrad as he stepped forward, and the room quickly settled into respectful silence. He greeted the gathering warmly, explaining that the banquet existed for their sake. His only wish was for everyone to enjoy the evening. From a careful distance, Jay observed the scene. The atmosphere inside the banquet hall had reached its height. That was the sign. He quietly composed himself. From this point on, he needed to stay prepared for whatever followed. Beyond the warmth and light of the hall, darkness stirred. A group of dark priests moved through the shadows, steadily approaching the city. The calm atmosphere soon broke apart. A guard rushed inside, tension clear in every movement as he informed the Archbishop that an emergency had occurred. Conrad turned toward him with a controlled frown, seeking clarification. The guard struggled to deliver the report. Before he could fully explain, a massive swarm of abominations had already appeared at the city's northern gate. A powerful impact echoed through the area, causing the hall to tremble. As confusion spread among the guests, Jay's thoughts returned to the elder's earlier explanation. No matter how sudden the dark priest's attack might be, confronting all the knights stationed at the banquet was beyond their ability. That left only one option. They would create chaos somewhere within the city and force the troops to divide their forces. The opening created by that distraction would become their chance to attack the banquet hall. Back in the present, the Archbishop immediately issued orders. Everything possible was to be done to stop the abominations without delay. Troops could be withdrawn from the banquet if necessary. Jay's expression hardened. Preventing that exact outcome was the most important part of the strategy. The elder, however, lacked the authority to command the Archbishop's forces. That responsibility had fallen to Cini. The plan still required one final step, and before the knights could be influenced by the chaos outside, the banquet hall had to become the first target. Without warning, an explosion tore through the hall. Cries of alarm erupted from every direction as part of the ceiling gave way, sending dust and rubble crashing down. Guards immediately shouted orders, directing the knights to shield the officials. Jay observed the scene and released a quiet breath. The plan had succeeded. The knights had remained at their positions. Beyond the hall, hidden within the darkness, the dark priests halted at the sound of the blast. One of them questioned whether the explosion had been part of their operation. The answer struck them immediately. Their enemies had discovered the plan. They had known the dark priests were coming. At the same time, Jay drew his sword and prepared himself. It was time to catch the rats. Elsewhere in the darkness, the dark priests watched the distant explosion and sensed movement approaching them. The yellow-haired man wondered if a traitor existed among their ranks, but before any response could come, one of the priests calmly announced that the operation was being abandoned. They would retreat and prepare a new strategy. The yellow-haired priest reacted with open frustration. For the first time in years, he had felt excited for a mission, and now everything was ending before it truly began. His irritation was impossible to hide. Before anyone could take a single step back, something sharp sliced through the air. The yellow-haired priest intercepted it at the last moment, his body instantly tensing. Then Jay appeared. He faced the group without any sign of haste and made his intentions clear. Entering had been easy. Leaving would not be. The female priest narrowed her eyes. She recognized him immediately. He was the man connected to the incident involving the Golden Bug's sons. Suspicion quickly filled her expression. She wanted to know whether he had been responsible, whether he was the one who had exposed their plans. Before the tension could fully erupt, a sudden strike slammed into one of the priests. The elder stepped forward. His voice remained calm as he addressed a man named Vikram. Vikram straightened and fixed his gaze on him. Jay looked toward the elder, surprised, and asked whether he knew that man. The elder confirmed it. The connection between them was not a pleasant one. Vikram was a virtue monk. He had also once been his disciple. A cold laugh escaped Vikram. The word disciple sounded almost ridiculous to him. He questioned whether the old man was still trapped in those worthless memories, unable to separate the past from the present. According to him, the elder always possessed a special talent for making his blood boil. At that moment, Jay's attention shifted toward something completely unexpected, something he had never anticipated seeing. Vikram was using the mind's eye, the same technique Bao possessed. At first, Jay had failed to recognize it. Now, however, he could clearly sense the mana of the mind's eye flowing from Vikram. The elder glanced toward Jay and instructed him to deal with the remaining two opponents before turning away and rushing toward Vikram. The two immediately clashed in a fierce battle. The yellow-haired priest reacted at once. This was exactly the kind of fight he had been hoping for. The female priest stepped forward as well, determined to test the true strength of Jin's side. Then her body began to change. Her form twisted and shifted into that of a black panther, powerful, agile, and dangerous. Jay studied the transformation, a shape-shifting ability combined with immense physical strength, enough to swing a heavy mace as though it weighed nothing. He admitted to himself that facing such an opponent without preparation would have been troublesome. That was no longer an issue. Through Enoch's memories, he had already analyzed their abilities beforehand. Only one problem remained. The Heresy Inquisitor was still observing from the shadows. His thoughts were interrupted when the yellow-haired priest rushed forward, bringing down his iron mace with brutal force. Jay immediately recognized the difficulty. He could not use the powers of his monster cores during this battle. Not while the Inquisitor was watching. It was a serious restriction. He raised his sword and smoothly redirected the incoming mace. The yellow-haired priest froze in surprise. A sword had just deflected his mace. At the same moment, the Black Panther attacked from behind. Confident that the strike could not be avoided, she lunged forward. A flash of steel cut through the air. She was forced backward, wounded before her attack could connect. Jay steadied his breathing and allowed himself to sink into the flow of combat. The sensation reminded him of the nightmare from 12 years earlier. In his mind, the experience felt almost familiar. A little extra training weight would have made it even better. It had been a very long time since he had experienced a real fight. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Bao and Vikram remained locked in a violent exchange. Bao observed the movements of his former disciple and quickly noticed a familiar flaw. Vikram still committed too much of his body when attacking. Nothing about that habit had changed. His tendency to chase new methods instead of relying on proven ones remained exactly the same. Vikram answered immediately. In his eyes, it was not stubbornness, it was individuality, and that was something he had no intention of abandoning. He spoke in a steady and controlled manner. For a long time, he had wanted to support Vikram's chosen path. A new path was never easy to walk, yet it sometimes led to remarkable results. The issue had never been the path itself. The problem had always been Vikram's impatience and endless greed. Those flaws had corrupted the individuality he once possessed. Methods built on deception and falsehood were destined to fall apart sooner or later. Bao urged him to pay close attention, because what came next would be his final lesson. As he spoke, the power of the mind's eye began to spread from him, the all-seeing eye. Vikram stared at him. That technique should only be possible for someone who had reached the highest realm. Just as expected, the old man possessed the experience to support every lesson he taught. Compared to their last meeting, he had become even stronger. Yet, in Vikram's eyes, that was exactly why the old man was flawed. The world did not work the way he claimed. A lie perfected to the point of perfection eventually became truth. As those thoughts settled, something began to awaken around Vikram. Energy gathered in the air. The pressure steadily increased as he activated his own technique. The mind's eye, the all-seeing eye. Bao's body stiffened. Disbelief and alarm mixed within his voice as he tried to understand what he was seeing. There should have been no way for Vikram to use that technique.